Hello and welcome back to Zenin Fanfics. Today we're starting an exciting new series. What if Deku met All Might 5 years early? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more content. The story we're featuring is written by Krisamity on archiveofourown.org. You can find all the relevant links in the description, so be sure to check out the author's profile and say hello. Now let's dive into the story. He wasn't meant to be here, but whatever it was that day to lead him to be standing in front of his favorite hero, who was bleeding profusely on the ground and looking a terrifying man in the eye, that was similar to just stare death in the face. Izuku can't remember how he got here. He recalls pieces on that day. A field excursion to an aquarium, Kakin, and other bullies attempting to beat the 9-year-old Izuku down, all because the boy was quirkless. He wasn't thinking, all he did was flee away like a coward, but the problem came to be that he ran too far, and now he was lost. He hasn't visited this side of town. Honestly, he isn't even sure if he is even near to where his home is. He kept wandering around trying to get the attention of anyone to ask for guidance. But no one paid any mind to the quirkless boy. Before he knew it, it grew dark outside and night descended over the city, and somehow Izuku was in the warehouse district. He gave up on trying to find assistance, or even a police station. So instead, he curled up into a ball leaning against the wall of a warehouse. He pulls out his shattered phone that got broken when Kakin caused him to collapse on it while pushing him. It was beyond hopeless to even try to see if the phone would function. He wasn't sure how long he sat there on the ground waiting for his mom to locate him, but that's when the ground shook around him, causing the building to vibrate. For a second, he thought it was an earthquake, but then a loud explosion rang over the neighborhood. Izuku couldn't help but let out a terrified shriek as he cowered behind the warehouse, even though he felt the build beginning to be pulled apart. All he could do was pray the wall he was hidden behind wouldn't collapse on him. Everything eventually stopped shaking, unlike Izuku, who was quivering in fear. The wall that was once part of a warehouse was all that was left among the rubble. Fire was burning around him, causing the bitter cold to vanish from the child's bones and be replaced with uncomfortable heat. Izuku could hear voices in the distance, thinking it was help, but came to realize it were only two voices, and one was taunting and cold while the other sounded courageous and very familiar. Izuku realized he recognized this voice as he heard it on the TV or on the computer screen almost every night. The dread vanished and was replaced with hope as he peered over the wall and looked into the destroyed warehouse district to see a man with white hair standing over a fallen man. And that's when the terror risen over Izuku again. The fallen figure was All Might, the best hero to ever live, who was now broken and bleeding all over the ground where he laid. This is impossible, Izuku thought to himself. He is meant to be unbeatable. However, he couldn't deny that it was truly All Might who was badly hurt and needed assistance. But what could a quirkless kid like me do? But those thoughts vanished as the man in a black suit raised his hand, watching the man's arm expand on itself, as if ready to fire down on the fallen All Might. And before he had a moment to think, Izuku's legs began to run in their direction, falling once into the ground, cutting his hand on some shards of metal on the ground, but quickly getting up still and continuing to run towards All Might. That's how he found himself here. Now remembered why he was standing in front of this terrifying guy with a fallen All Might behind him. Thankfully, the man in the suit was stunned to why a child was standing in front of him attempting to protect the #1 hero, but that 1 second of hesitation was all an older gentleman needed to come crashing behind the man in the suit, kicking him in the head. The man in the suit stumbles and attempted to redirect the blast he had stored in his arm towards the elder gentleman, but he was already gone along with the child, who find himself in the arms on that same old guy. Tashinori, get up, you huge idiot, the elderly man yelled. All Might raised his head and began to get back up onto his feet, with a hand holding his injured side. All for one is attempting to get into your head. Stop listening to that monster. The elderly man landed on a further warehouse that was still standing, letting Izuku go. All Might finally all the way up again, standing up straight, facing the guy in the suit down. Izuku learning what that man is called, but all he could do now was wait and pray that All Might is effective in winning. Going down in his fighting posture, All Might was ready. Charging forward, with a raised fist, All Might was able to strike a blow to All for One's face, causing the man to stagger over and over again All Might was delivering strike after blow, but All for One was able to catch most of them and redirect them. Eventually the two were locked in a power struggle, each of them holding the other fist in the air. But All Might wasn't ready to give in, as he head-butted All for One in the face, causing the man to stumble backwards, letting All Might gain momentum and deliver a powerful blow to the face while screaming, "United States plus Ultra Smash," causing the wave of a powerful wind blast all over the destroyed warehouse district. The old man had to hold on the Izuku while hiding away from the explosion, so neither are blown away from the blast. Hiding his face away from the dust and other rubble that was flying around the place, Izuku was able to open his eyes again when he felt the breeze die down. He looks up to see the guy in the suite was down and wasn't getting up. Izuku wanted to rejoice and scream in All Might's triumph, but that slowly died in his throat when he saw All Might stagger on his feet, ultimately fall to his knees. "All Might!" Izuku screamed, rushing to get to his feet and ready to find his way down the warehouse he was on. But the old man seized Izuku by the scruff of his hoodie and carried them both down from the warehouse, landing close to where All Might had fallen. When he got to his feet, Izuku ran to All Might when the elderly man went to All for One and delivered the finale blow to the man's head, encaving the man's skull. Thankfully, Izuku never noticed as he skid to a stop and was kneeling and looked over All Might. That's when the child noticed the gaping hole in All Might's stomach. Quickly taking off his sweatshirt, Izuku crumbled it into a ball and pressed it down on the wind, but hardly covered it, as the sweatshirt was meant for a 5-year-old, as Izuku was small for his own age, and this man was huge, and the wound was even larger. All Might coughed and groaned in pain as he opened his eyes to see a tiny greenet standing over him, trying to help him. But All Might felt it. It was hopeless, and it was impossible for this child or any other help to come in time for him. So with his bloody hand, he takes Izuku's hand, prompting the boy to look up at All Might. With little effort, All Might gave this child a reassuring smile. But that look in his eyes, Izuku knew that All Might was attempting to tell him it was hopeless. Growing limp, Izuku gave up trying to apply pressure to All Might's wound and just tried to return a smile to give the dying man some form of comfort. But it turned into a watery mess as Izuku couldn't control his crying. But that smile that this child gave him brought tears to All Might's eyes as he thought, "Thank God I ran into you, or rather you ran into me before I was gone." As he took both of the child's hands and flipped them over, ready to pull a hair from his head to give to this child, he noticed a cut on one of the boy's hands. So instead he pressed his bloody fingers into the boy's hand, and with the last of his strength, he passed on his power to the boy. He longed to say something to this boy, anything, to tell him thank you, to tell him of the gift he passed on, to tell him how pleased he is that he found his successor before he passed. All he wanted to do was console this little boy, but couldn't find the words, as all that came out was blood that was stuck in his throat. So instead he looks behind the boy to see his teacher, and the look he gave him caused the old man's eyes to widen, realizing what All Might was trying to tell him. The old man wanted to yell at the dying man, but that look in All Might's eyes screamed for him to trust All Might and to please raise this boy as he had done for All Might. So with heavy heart, the old man nodded his head, which gave All Might the reassurance he needed before he looks to the child once more before darkness started to crawl in his vision, and slowly All Might's heart gave out, dying in front of Izuku and his old teacher. Seeing All Might's eyes start to fog over, Izuku couldn't hold back his sobs, his body raked over with guilt and sorrow. Finally, he was able to meet his hero, and here he was with the guy dead in front of him. He felt a hand on his shoulder as it attempted to give him comfort, but it was no use. Not a minuet later, sirens were heard in the distance as police vehicles rolled in. A detective named Sakachi stepped out of a cursor, looking over the scene in front of him. What he saw shocked him to the core. The entire warehouse district was falling apart, while also in fire. The villain named All for One was dead on the ground with his head bashed in. And so was a dead All Might, and a young child crying over the hero, and All Might's teacher Gran Torino was standing behind the child, grieving over the hero as well. Sakachi can only frame this scene out of a nightmare. Izuku and Gran Torino were brought to the hospital as Izuku's mother was summoned for both discovering the boy and potential injury. But the only concern the doctors had over the boy was the amount of smoke he might have inhaled in, and the trauma of witnessing the #1 hero perish in front of him. All Might was sealed into a body bag and loaded into a separate vehicle from the child and the elderly man. All for One was also carted into one, but tossed into one distinct to the hero. Gran Torino kept a watch on the child next to him who had finally stopped sobbing, but now the young boy couldn't even help but remain upright as slumber was attempting to take the boy under. A weighty burden kept weighing on the elderly man's shoulders as he pondered about what was inside of this child. This child is far too young to produce one for all, and yet he couldn't ease off on teaching the boy as soon as possible just in case this boy inadvertently set one for all off. It would destroy the child. Once in the hospital, Gran Torino demanded for both Izuku and himself to remain together so he could keep a watch on the child. Detective encountered the two in their room, inquiring for the events that occurred in the warehouse area. Gran Torino gave him all the events in sequence, but requested the man to allow the child a day or two before asking the kid the same things as this boy's world is about to be turned upside down once his parents and the others get here. Seemingly getting an idea what Gran Torino was hinting at, Sakachi's eyes grow wide as he shifts his attention to the little boy who is now sleeping on his own hospital bed. A half an hour later, a lady that had both green hair and green eyes came rushing into the hospital, saying she was informed her child, Midoriya Izuku, was here. She was ushered inside by a nurse into the shared room to see 3 other gents were in there, along with her young son who was still asleep but seemed to have a bad dream. She wanted to question the men right away, but she had to stop herself as her son captured her attention first. So slowly she went to her son's side, delicately shaking her son aware, saying softly, Izu, honey, it's just a dream. Mom is here now. Slowly, green eyes open and look up at her. Automatically, tears wheeled up in the boy's eyes, and he launches himself into his mom's embrace, sobbing into her blouse. But Mrs. Midoriya was patient with her child, tenderly holding him as he sobbed. She wanted to cry as well, but she must remain strong for her son, and also they were in the company of 3 other males. Being able to calm her child down and having Seattle back onto his bed, Mrs. Midoriya got off the bed for a second to direct her attention to the men and bowed politely to them. My apologies for not introducing myself yet. She says, my name is Midoriya Inko. Midoriya is Izuku's mother. Sakachi bows back to the mother, while both Gran Torino and Sir Night-Eye only nod their heads. It's a pleasure to meet you, Midoriya-san, the investigator says. I am Decked. Sakachi. And these two are Gran Torino, All Might's former instructor, and Sir Night-Eye, All Might's former sidekick. Inko nods, looking over the men. I was informed that my son was involved with a horrible mishap with All Might, but I just hoped I might have heard wrong. She says, bowing once more. I apologize for your loss, Torino-san, Night-Eye-san. Thank you, Midoriya-san. I also apologize that your kid somehow slipped into the middle of all of this. Gran Torino states, I can't comprehend how traumatic it must have been for such a small kid to see their hero perish in front of them. Yes, well, my son won't ever be attending that school ever again for enabling my son to become lost like that. Inko states with anger evident in her gaze. Midoriya-san, there is something essential we must talk with you about your son. He isn't in any trouble, but he could be in the future unless we're too fast to act, the detective says. I don't understand. Inko begins. Yes. What does this kid have more to do with us? Sir Night-Eye eventually pipes up. You wouldn't tell me anything until Midoriya-san came to accompany this young boy. I have much to do before this night is over, so if you would, just get to the point already, Gran Torino. Inko glares at Night-Eye, not liking his tone and how easy he disregarded her and her son, but Gran Torino spoke up first. All Might passed one for all down to this child before he died. He said it out loud, cut and dry. Everyone was quiet in the room for a minute, as Inko was puzzled what this meant. Izuku just being too tired to even participate, and both the detective and Night-Eye's just staring at Gran Torino in astonishment. What? Night-Eye cried out, causing Izuku to whimper. Inko reached over to her baby to console him while still glaring at Night-Eye. Of all the irresponsible things that man has done, this fucking takes the whole fucking cake. He continued to scream, prompting Izuku to break into sobs again. Watch your tone and language. Inko snaps at the guy. Midoriya-san is right, Sasaki. If you can't control yourself in front of the child, then I am going to have to order you to exit the room. Sakachi informs Sir Nightai. Nightai grits his teeth, but chooses to keep his lips sealed. I don't comprehend what one for all is. Inko says, what is it that All Might entrusted to my son? And what does that imply for Izuku? Gran Torino states, you know how the reporters could never work out what All Might's quirk was? Well, there is a cause for that, as it's been kept a secret for centuries. Because with the information that this quirk possesses, will drive enemies to approach in swarms to attempt and claim it for themselves. With this, it strikes Inko what they meant, what All Might gave to Izuku, and her heart's pound in her chest for the dread she felt for her son. So All Might gave my 9-year-old quirkless son a potent quirk that has been handed down for generations. What do you mean quirkless? Nightai seethed. Yes, and with each holder, the power that lives in your boy only gets greater. When he comes to learn to harness the power once he is bigger and his body able to endure it, he will be more powerful than All Might himself. Gran Torino resumes. What would happen if he used it now? Inko was scared to inquire, but needed to know the truth. Gran Torino sighs, knowing he will have to respond to this. It will destroy him. Inko breathes and collapses back onto Izuku's bed. Nightai used this opportunity to make his case. Then we should take one for all from this kid and pass it on to a more worthier host, he says. You said it yourself, Gran Torino. This kid isn't capable of hanging onto this much power. Gran Torino snapped at Nightai as he was growing weary of listening to this grown-ass man's tantrum. I said once he can hold on to with a more suitable body, then he is more deserving of one for all than anyone. I saw it. All might acknowledge it. That boy raced headlong into danger, knowing plainly he could do nothing against the danger that All Might confronted, and yet that boy still protected All Might for a split second, and that split second was all that torture needed to triumph against that monster. You honestly think that All Might saw my son worthy of this power? Inko says, and not a split second in the intensity of the moment. You can't possibly be considering this. Nightai screams at her. Nightai screams at her. Yes, I do, Gran Torino says. And when everything was all said and done, your boy ran to Toshi's side and tried to help him again, but trying to keep him alive. But when he learned it was impossible, your son gave All Might the comfort of a smile until he died. Your son's son will be the finest hero this planet has ever seen. Inko sighs and turns to her son, who is unaware, but gazing out to the distance, not completely all they're silent yet. And as his mother, it was her choice to make, but hearing how her young son did something so brave without a quirk, she can't dispute the fact he will shine even brightly with one. So she looks to the men and agrees. Okay, so what must we do to safeguard him until he is ready to harness one for all? She questions. No, Nightai resumed. You all are nuts. Didn't you hear the old man? Your son could die. Do you not even love him enough to just throw him headlong into this? That's it. Sakachi cracks, losing his patience. Get out now, Nightai. He pointed to the entrance. Night wanted to dispute more, but the investigator halted him. You must get out of this room on your own free will, or you will be removed by force and in cuffs. Snapping his mouth shut, Nightai storms to the door, but before he could open it, Inko pipes up. Yes, I love my son more than anything in this world. I love my son when I discovered he was quirkless. I love my son when his father chose to abandon us to go abroad because he couldn't bear the thought of your son being quirkless. I love my boy when he returned home with injuries and I had to patch him up daily. I love my kid when I attempted to drag the school system to court but had nothing to stick them with. She turns to look Nightai in the eye. I will continue to love and support my son even now when his world is going to change, because no matter what, I am his mother, and mothers love their children unconditionally, she says. Nightai was stunned into silence, so with nothing left to say, Nightai exited the room, leaving the three other adults to continue speaking about young Izuku's future and the measures they must take to safeguard him. All the while, as Izuku continued to stare at the wall, where a tall, muscular guy stood with brilliant golden hair, gazing back at him. No one wanted to wait for a minute longer to give Izuku the protection he needed. Midoriya Inko took her son out of his old grade education and served them a court-order summoning. As now with her son being left in peril while in their care, she finally had something to stick to them. It wasn't even the end of the week when Inko and Izuku were called to UA High School by the headmaster himself, Nedzu, Gran Torino, and Detective Tostachi escort the tiny family to the school where they met Nedzu in his own office, where he introduced himself to Inko and Izuku. I came to discover the situation of our young potential hero here. Nedzu pointed his paw in Izuku's direction, who was embarrassed. It was only a day ago when his mother and Gran Torino had to convey to Izuku he was no longer quirkless. So as his future principal, I would like to give young Midoriya a place here in UA, now rather than later, he says. I myself have time on my paws where I can give the child instruction for the upcoming grades before he enters his first year here in UA. Also, might I add, we can offer the finest instructors to help train and teach young Midoriya how to get his body to harness one for all. That's great and all, but Izuku requires more than the safeguard of the school? Inko asked. I am not saying I am ungrateful, but this power is a threat to Izuku now, and I don't believe I will be able to stop Izuku if it randomly turns up when he is home with me, or home alone when I work. Nedzu only smiles. Yes, thank you for my next point. He says, I have always wanted to make UA into an on-campus school with dorms for a long time now, but never had the opportunity or the right reason to do so. But now, with young Midoriya in my care, if you were to accept, I would like to put this into effect, including young Midoriya. He will remain on campus in a dorm with the instructors who will be able to keep a watch on him throughout the days. He will remain on campus in a dorm with the instructors who will be able to keep a watch on him throughout the days. As for the weekends, the pupils are allowed to return home, and young Izuku will be followed by an instructor that will be changed weekly, so he may also return home as well. Inko was stunned by this news. This chimera actually thought of everything to guarantee her son's protection. I am very pleased that this is what the school is ready to go this far for my son, she squeaks. Though leaving my kid home on the weekends with a teacher is too much to ask for. We reside 2 hours by vehicle from here and an hour by train. The instructors must have better things to do than follow my son. No worries, Midoriya-san, Nedzu says, pulling a folder out of a drawer and giving it over for Inko to take, what she does. As of today, there is an open home that was just constructed on the outskirts of the school and the forest for both seclusion and a safety precaution I took upon myself to guarantee for young Midoriya's mother. You are to be moving in as soon as possible, and it's only a 15-minute walk for your boy, his instructor, to reach you. Inko, Tostachi, and Gran Torino were all shocked in stillness at the chimera. Poor Izuku was confused about what in the world was occurring. He knows he has a quirk now, that he was given this quirk by All Might himself, as a gift for helping him and remaining by his side when all might need him. He understands that this quirk is his greatest dream coming true, but also very dangerous for Izuku to use now. But what he didn't comprehend was why he had to leave his old school behind, including both Kakin and Annie behind. His mom says it's for the best, even though it hurts that he couldn't even say farewell. He doesn't understand why UA, the best hero school, wanted an 8-year-old to attend them. He doesn't understand why the hero Nedzu wanted to directly teach him, or even the fact he will be moving into UA in a dorm along with other teachers. This fact causes Izuku's eyes water into tears, imagining he won't be staying with his mother. However, Inko reassures her boy that he will see her constantly, for both lunch and dinner, and also before bedtime. There was also the reality they had to leave their old home behind to move into the forest that surrounds UA, where a brand new home awaits them. Izuku will be spending his weekends there with his parents and a teacher he hasn't met yet. Though there is positive news to this, though. Inko guaranteed Izuku a puppy that will be following Izuku from both UA and to home. She and Nedzu agreed that the young boy will profit by having an emotional support animal during all of these changes. The one thing Izuku couldn't comprehend the most, however, was the man with blonde hair kept following Izuku around. It seems he is the only one to see him, however, as he attempted to mention it to his mother one morning, asking why the man was in his room last night. But his mom told him he must have dreamt that there was no man there, as it was just her and Izuku that night. So as he waited in the garden when Inko and other hired help packed up their house, Izuku used this time to try and speak to this guy. Are you real? He asks first. The man always looks sad while observing Izuku, but this time his expression changed to surprise as he looked around himself to see if the young boy was talking to him. But not only was there no one else there, but Izuku was staring directly at him. Are you talking to me? The man queries, pointing to himself. Izuku nods. You talk, so you must be real, he concludes. Why am I the only one that can see you? The man frowns before kneeling in front of the boy. I don't know why, my boy, he says. This is news to me that you can even see me. I've been looking at you for days now. Izuku says, why can't I see you? The man sighs. Look, it might be best to keep this between us, my boy. I don't want anyone to think you're crazy, because how I am now, no one should be able to see me. Are you a ghost then? Izuku suggests. The man opened his mouth looking to argue with the boy, but instead he sighs again and nods. Yeah, I am not alive anymore. Honestly, I am not even sure why I am still here, but that doesn't matter because I want to be here for you, he says. Okay, go-san. Izuku nods. I won't tell anyone. The guy laughed, and his smile was so bright that made his blue eyes shine, which caused Izuku to smile for a while. It's been a while since the boy last smiled. Oh, please don't call me that, the guy says. Call me Yagi-san if you must. Izuku agrees. Okay, Yagi-san. My name is Midoriya Izuku. Well, young Midoriya, can you see others like me? As far as I can tell, you were quirkless until recently. Unless no one was aware you did have a quirk. It would be difficult to react if this is your quirk. Yagi remarks. Izuku shakes his mind. No, you're the first ghost I ever met. I was quirkless until All Might gave me his. But you can't tell anyone that. This is a secret, Izuku says while shushing Yagi. Yagi smiles, extending a hand out to ruffle the boy's green locks, but his hand phased straight, though Izuku, which caused Yagi to frown again, but quickly turned it back into a smile. Don't worry, young Midoriya. Your secret is safe with me, he says. Please call me Izuku. Izuku persisted. Yagi's grin only broadened. Okay, Inko and Izuku were traveling back to UA a day later while a moving van was taking all their things to their new house. The only item that followed them to UA was things to decorate Izuku's new room in the dorms back at UA. Inko vowed on his first weekend back at home they will go buying for new items to adorn his new room at their house. While getting at the entryway at UA, Inko parked up front the doors to the school. Waiting for them already was Nedzu along with a guy clad in black clothes with long black hair, tied up in a bun, and a weary look that he wore. In the man's arms was a St. Bernard puppy that was licking the exhausted man's face, who just disregarded the puppy. Izuku climbs out of the vehicle along with Inko. Izuku glances to Nedzu and the interloper before bowing. My name is Midoriya Izuku. Please take care of me, he says to them. Nedzu smiles while coming down the steps to welcome the Midoriyas. Young Midoriya, it's lovely to see you again, the Chimera says, welcoming the small kid. Midoriya-san, I am eternally thankful for your confidence in us to care for your son, he tells Inko. It is I who is grateful for this chance that you are providing my son, she adds. I don't know what I would do if he wasn't going to get the assistance he required with his quirk developing under difficult circumstances. She uses the rational ploy that Nedzu and Inko decided to use to keep the secret where Izuku acquired his quirk from. The school was told of the predicament that Izuku found himself in along with All Might. When the 8-year-old boy saw his hero in danger, the boy manifested his quirk to try and save his hero. They are conscious it's dangerous for the child to use it now, as it's comparable to All Might's ability, and that he is fortunate to be still living when the quirk manifested. It's no problem at all. Mr. Aizawa here will be the one to keep a watch on young Midoriya for the most of the time he is here. He gestures to the guy behind him as Aizawa joins Nedzu in meeting the family. He is an underground hero named Eraserhead. He has the power to erase anyone's quirks. Izuku states with enthusiasm. Fanboy much. Yagi says behind Izuku, attempting to conceal his laugh behind a palm. Aizawa appears surprised at the child. Hardly anyone knows who he is, so it was a surprise that his 8-year-old son knows who he is and what his quirk is. That's correct. Nedzu claps his hands. How clever of you to know young Midoriya. Izuku pipes down, blushing like mad, looking down at his feet that was kicking at the ground. When I didn't have a quirk, I'll like to study any other H-hero's quirks and analyze them, he stutters. It was a hobby of mine. Ned's grin widens, pondering if this kid perhaps more than what he led on to be. Well, if you don't mind, could you bring your analyses to your lessons? That is, if you have them written down somewhere. Izuku peeks straight back up. Yes, sir. I do have them in notebooks that I have written over the years, though there are only 8 of them so far. Both Nezu and Aizawa's eyes widen to this finding. 8. Nezu says, "My boy, that is beyond amazing. Now I am very interested about what you have jotted down in your notebooks." Izuku nods, but then turns his focus to Aizawa, finally noting what was in his arms. Izuku beams warmly, moving closer to see the puppy in the man's arms. "Is that what I think it is?" Izuku squeaks. Nezu acknowledges while motioning for Aizawa to hand the child the puppy. Helping the boy hold the puppy, Izuku had to end up sitting on the ground as the puppy was too large and hefty for Izuku to hold, so instead he held them in his lap. The puppy seems to understand that they were intended for this little boy and begins to lick Izuku's face excessively, causing the boy to explode into laughter. All the adults couldn't help but to have their hearts melt at the sound of this young child's laughing and bright as the sun smile. "This little fellow is a boy," Nezu stated. "It's only appropriate for the boy who this puppy is to name them." Izuku stared at the huge puppy in his arms and knew this puppy will be a big dog once it grows up, so he thought of an ideal name for a big dog. "Sumo-san." Izuku cheers. "His name is going to be Sumo-san. Like the wrestler?" Aizawa questions with amusement. Izuku nods and cuddles the puppy. Nodding with accord, Nezu passes the boy a collar that he had for the puppy. "We will get a tag with Sumo-san's name on it later today." He informs Izuku, who took the collar and put it on the wriggling puppy. Midoriya, Izuku, and Midoriya Inko were brought to the teacher residence where Izuku will be residing. The dorm appears to be the same form of the school, but only a little bit smaller, but still bigger than life of a housing. Izuku was brought inside where there were pro-heroes who were UA's teachers already inside and seemed to also Seattle into their new accommodations. Aizawa guided the Midoriyas to the elevator where all 4 of them, including Yagi, but no one can see him, cram themselves inside. Nezu takes out a unique access card and swipes a scanner, and it brings them to the top level. Once opening the doors, the Midoriyas were astonished to see it was taken into a penthouse. It was equipped with a sitting room, kitchen off to the side along with a dining table. Off to the left were blocked-off rooms. "Come with me, young Midoriya." Nezu takes Izuku off to the side. Izuku follows the Chimera to where he unlocks a door to a big child's room. Off to the side that opened to another offside room was a playroom filled with toys and a small jungle gym for Izuku to play in and collect muscle in his child's frame. Nezu unlocks another door that leads to a restroom that links to Izuku's new room and to another room off to the side. In the rear of the bathroom was an open closet that was packed with children's clothes that would suit Izuku and a child-size UA uniform and gym clothes. Aizawa and Inko came from the other side of the restroom where the second bedroom was. Nezu wanted to make sure to offer the mother a choice to be able to spend the night on the school grounds if she chose to. There was even a second area in the closet where she could keep her clothes. Even a workspace that linked to the second bedroom for her, where she can do her work as she did earlier in the week, requested to be working from home now for her firm. On the other half of the apartment is where I will be staying, so I can be near Midoriya in case his quirk was to trigger at any time. Aizawa explained to Inko, indicating behind him, where another pair of doors resided. "We also have Gran Torino nearby to where your guy's new home is, so he can come freely to assist with Izuku's training." Nezu speaks up. Inko was in tears by the end of the visit as she saw what this school was ready to do to assist her and her boy. Yes, it was unfortunate what happened to All Might, and everyone was grieving the symbol of peace demise. It was also horrible that Izuku had to be there to witness it and be given a quirk that could kill him at any moment. But to see that people around her were willing to go so far to protect her child meant the world for her. She knows if anything were to ever happen to her, Izuku will be secure, as now he has the entire school behind him. Inko discovered herself in the dining area while Nezu was making tea for her, so she might be able to settle down. Izuku departed with Aizawa Shoyuta to collect the remainder of the boys' stuff from the car. Nezu handed Inko her cup as he settled across from her with his own cup. "Is this all too much for you, Midoriya-san?" he questions her. "I am apologetic if it is. I'm not very accustomed to human views and values. I only wanted to offer Midoriya-kun the finest that I could give, he says, waving his paw around, showing off the penthouse that he constructed for that solitary kid. No. I mean, sure, it is a lot to take in, but no, it isn't you or what the school is doing for Izuku. I just can't help but ponder and pose the what-if questions in the back of my head, she says. Oh. Nezu asks, how about you share some of those what-if queries with me? Maybe I can assist you with cleansing your mind. Inko bows. What if Izuku never ran into All Might? What if All Might never granted Izuku his power? Would everyone around us do as much for him now, if it were then? Nezu was quiet for a moment, taking in the queries she was asking. Well, if Izuku didn't run to All Might, or did not run away from his teacher and peers, Izuku's existence would have remained as it has been for now. Who knows, maybe in another world, All Might would have escaped the confrontation with All for One. Maybe he would have encountered Izuku when the boy was older and still given him one for all. Or maybe All Might determined Izuku was too weak to transfer the power onto the child. But seeing your son, I don't believe he would take that lying down. He would want to prove everyone wrong that a quirkless kid could become a hero on his own accord. Or even worse, show the heroes up by choosing a different side. Inko gasps as her thoughts never went that far. She wanted to fight for her son's sake, but Nezu held up a paw and eyes imploring for her to hear him out. Being in our society, well, they make it obvious that there is no place for quirkless children like your son. He adds, suicide rates has increased for those who are quirkless. More than half of them don't even make it to high school in your son's age. But Izuku, he is a very special child, with or without a quirk. He is very clever, very kind, and very compassionate. He, along with All Might, needs to be cherished for their smiles alone. But society is cruel, and it's already collapsing with our pillar of support being set to be buried 6 feet in the earth. That pillar was both a beautiful thing, but so very fickle if it crumbled so easily, and unfortunately society is going to continue to go down this road unless we lead the next generation to be able to hold it up, not just Izuku, but everyone. We cannot ascend with only one holding up the world. Nezu stares at Inko and raises on his chair to grasp Inko's hand. No matter the cause or route your son has been brought to, that child will lead this world to a better and a new society that won't crumble after one man's death. Be it a hero or a villain, quirk or quirkless. But I am not going to lie how grateful that in this universe I have been given a chance to help the young symbol of peace to rise out of the ashes that All Might has left behind and shine brighter than a phoenix in the sky. Because to me, in this school, and soon to the society, Izuku is a phoenix of hope. Inko's smile was bright and full with optimism. More than anything else, she is proud of her son and also thankful in this world her son will bring hope. Not because of obligations, but because that's who the 9-year-old is. She only hopes that this school will help Izuku to not fit into societal norms, but help him and his generation to do better than the ones that came before them. Izuku, along with Shoyuta, came back inside with Izuku's things. Sumo was close to the boy's heel, not wanting to leave his master's side for a second, which Shoyuta took as a positive indication. Though Shoyuta knew he would still assist that child to teach the puppy. Too bad it wasn't a cat that Nezu chose to gift Izuku. Shoyuta is more of a cat person than a dog one. Though seeing this young boy joyfully walking with a happy puppy by his side, Shoyuta only knew that this boy was going to give Shoyuta a run for his money. Yo Sho! A loud man across the teacher's dorm's common room shouted out to them. Who is that little green bean beside you? Leave him alone. A lady with dark hair like Shuta's and red glasses told the loud blonde guy. That's just appropriately his hidden love child. She snickers to herself. Shoyuta groans before turning to his claimed best friends before replying. Present Mike, Midnight, let me present you to our youngest student in UA, Midoriya Izuku. He gestures to the little greenet. What? Screamed Present Mike, who Shoyuta right away shut off his quirk before he frightened the child. Wait, isn't he like 5? Midnight reacts with, I'm 9.5. Izuku mutters. The 2 other adults stare down at the kid. Hearing how old he was still didn't help. Well, either way, isn't he like 6 years too early to be in high school? Midnight inquired. Yeah, what the fuck shoulda? Present Mike shouted at his buddy, but a lot less audibly, not wanting to piss off Eraserhead. Language Yamada. Shoyuta snapped, prompting the blonde guy to shut up. Shoyuta sighs. running a hand over his hair. You recall that unique situation we had in the meeting a few days ago? The one where a kid was going to attend UA to learn to use his quirk and be a student under Nezu, he tells them. Both stopped, recalling that encounter, and came to understand this must be the kid then. Wow. Midnight said, I believe you people left out the part where it came to his age, or the fact it was a little adorable green bean. She broke out giggling. No, all of his information was in the packets that were given out before the conference ever started. Shoyuta groans. Both Midnight and Present Mike ceased recognizing they've been discovered, not even reading their crucial information packets during their meetings. They prefer to just scheme through it if it can be helped. But obviously the two missed the ball on this one. Midnight and Present Mike uneasily chuckled while scratching their heads while Shoyuta glared angrily at the two. He shakes his head, wondering how in the world did these two get their teaching license was beyond him. He pushes the button on the elevator, hurting both Izuku and Sumo inside, before glaring at his colleagues once more before the doors shut. The three arrived back up to the penthouse. Shoyuta came to notice a weeping Inko at the dining table and Nezu attempting to console her. So instead, he led the child back to his room while saying, Why don't I give you a hand with your boxes? Besides, you said something about your interesting All Might collection that you wanted to show me. Beaming with delight, Izuku agreed, never even noting his weeping mother. Once inside his room, Shoyuta opens the boxes for the boy, and together they unloaded things and began to position them on the bookcases or the desk that was given to Izuku. Well, more like Izuku passes the figurines to Shoyuta while the elder guy puts them securely on the shelves for the child. The two of them were done, and Shoyuta was ripping the boxes apart while Izuku was folding them up so they could be tossed into the recycling later. Inko and Nezu arrived into the room to see the other two's hard work. Inko couldn't help but to chuckle that her son's dorm room was very similar to the one back in their old house. Now, however, Izuku did have even more space to add to his collection if he desired to. Izuku got up to take Nezu by his hand and demonstrate the chimera his collection. By the end of the day, Izuku was met in the dining area having a dinner with Shoyuta and Inko. When it was getting late, Inko tucked her son into bed, kissing his brow, before ensuring that she would be returning in 2 days to get him for All Might's burial. Izuku could hardly make out what his mother was saying as slumber was already dragging him under. When the boy was completely asleep, Inko made sure his new phone was on the charger, giving Izuku another kiss and stroking Sumo on the head who was lying across the boy's thighs. She went out of the room, not before making sure Izuku's All Might's night light was on first, and closed the door behind her. Shoyuta walked Inko to the elevator saying, Your boy is in excellent hands. I guarantee you that, Midoriya-san. I will do everything in my power to safeguard and educate him. I know you will, Inko says, shaking the man's hand. It's just hard leaving him here alone. As a parent, you don't anticipate your kid to leave the nest until they are full-fledged adults. Even then, you wouldn't mind keeping them a little bit longer. I understand your worries. I might not be a father, but I do worry for my own students. When they step across that stage and receive their diploma and their pro-hero licenses, you can't stop and think, have I taught them enough for the world? It's hard for anyone, he reassures her. If you like, you could spend the night. Nezu made sure you would have everything here if you choose to. Inko lowers her head. The path that Izuku is about to go down is going to be a hard one. And though he does need to learn, he needs assistance and can rely on others. He will regretfully come to learn as a mother who isn't a pro-hero can only cheer for him on the sidelines, she says. Shoyuta frowns. A boy will always need their mother, Midoriya-san, but not the manner I hope he will need from me. I want to whisk him away from everything and hide him away, she says, so this is healthy for the both of us. He needs you people here in the UA, and I need to get over my doubts and fears. With that said, Inko wished Shoyuta a good night and went into the lift. Shoyuta witnesses the door shuts, and it becomes the two only in the penthouse. Midoriya awakens up the next morning to Sumo whining and clawing at the bedroom door. Izuku yawns and extends out stiff joints before getting out of bed and putting on his All Might slipper. Nice slippers you got there, Yagi says on the other side of the room, seated on Izuku's desk. Morning, Yagi-san. Izuku says drowsy. Morning, Sumo-san. He pats his pup's head. Morning, Izuku. Yagi moves closer to the sleepy kid. Go check on your desk. It appears that Nezu left you a message there. Nodding, Izuku walks to the desk to see a little note, and on it reads, "Good morning, Midoriya-kun. I presume that Sumo-san must have awakened you up. No need to fear. Requiring to go all the way outside to let the puppy relieve itself isn't needed. Instead, simply open the folding door off to the left past your playroom. There is a terrace that goes around the entire back of the penthouse that links to your room, the dining room, and to Mr. Aizawa's room. There on the terrace is segmented grass where Sumo-san can do his business. And don't worry, the grass will prevent any gross odors, but you will still have to clean up after him, young man. Can't let the pups have little surprises around the balcony for Mr. Aizawa to discover. He might not have appreciated it before he had his first cup of coffee. Sincerely, Nezu." There's also a little drawing of the chimera on the bottom. Sincerely. Walking into his playroom, Izuku opened the folding door like instruct and beckoned Sumo to go outside. The puppy raced for the exterior balcony and went to the spot of guaranteed grass and swiftly squatted to do his business. Izuku looked at the grass with curious eyes and leaned down to feel the grass. It didn't feel or smell real, but he plucked a stalk of grass and it tugged away from the others like it was real. It was really fascinating to the 9-year-old kid. While that certainly is not a welcoming sight, so early in the morning. Shoyuta groans off to the side, leaning over the balcony's railing, holding a cup of coffee in his palms. The scene that he was referencing was Sumo making a dump directly beside him. Izuku blushes and immediately rushes to his pup's side and reprimands him. "No, bad Sumo. Not in front of Aizawa-sensei. He's just barely getting his first cup of coffee." Sumo whimpers, being caught, and swiftly storms away to the other side of the balcony to continue doing his business. Izuku groans while searching for something to pick up Sumo's poop with, while seeing a special grabber that he saw people walk their canines with to pick up their poops on their walk. Quickly, Izuku grabs it and cleans up after Sumo and throws it in a garbage can, but not sure what to do next after that. Don't stress about that, Midoriya. There will be a housekeeping bot around 11 to come and tidy the penthouse. Besides, I am far too occupied to do it myself. You are just a kid yourself. All I ask is to clean up after yourself and keep your room somewhat tidy. Shoyuta says, reads the kid's mind. Izuku nods and places the poop scooper next to the garbage can for later uses. Shoyuta downs his coffee and moves to the child, ruffling his green hair, before reaching behind Izuku to open the glass door that goes into the dining room. Shoyuta gestures for the child to go in first before following procedure and calling the dog to come in as well. Inside, Izuku went to work to locate where the bowls and cereal were put for a hurried breakfast, as he was informed yesterday that Nezu will be around after breakfast to take the child on a tour on the grounds. Shoyuta put his cup in the sink, washing it before positioning it on a drying rack. Izuku discovered a stepping stool where he was able to reach the cabinets where he found both the bowls and cereal in the one for him. Finding his favorite cereal, Izuku puts both of them down onto the counter surface before gingerly moving both to the dining table. Shoyuta decided to give the child a hand by taking the milk and a spoon from the cabinet and help Izuku ladle his cereal and milk into the dish before heading off to find his own meal, as the Lord knows coffee doesn't always cut it. "So, Aizawa-sensei, what do you usually teach here at UA?" Izuku queries with a mouth full of cereal. "First off, don't do that, kid. You're going to make me lose my appetite." He motions to Izuku's stuffed mouth. "Second, I am a homeroom teacher for Section 1A. I also teach both heroic and villain laws, including just regular citizen laws. I also assist with combat and rescue training. My days are already fairly full, not including my nighttime work as an underground hero." Izuku makes sure to swallow his food first before saying, "No wonder you always look so tired." He says, "I'm sorry you also have to put up with me on top of everything else." He glances away guiltily. Shoyuta sighs before settling by Izuku at the table before putting a hand on his head again. "Don't be, kid, it's not your fault." Shoyuta starts out with, "What happened that night, and everything that lead you here to be in UA and under my care. None of it is your fault, and I will never see you as a burden or troublesome, because protecting and teaching future heroes is my job, and I will be damned if I let that blind my judgment of you, kid." Izuku beams up at Shoyuta, which once again melts the stock man's heart. He clears his throat before speaking again. You best finish up your cereal there, Midoriya. Nezu will be around in half an hour. You will need to be cleaned and dressed in your UA uniform before he gets here. He instructs the kids who nod and start to speed eat his breakfast. In the meantime, I need to explain how this is all going to go down. For the rest of their breakfast time, Shoyuta explained to Izuku about his timetable and also should his own schedule, saying how only he, Nezu, and his mother, along with a few known UA employees, have the access cards to enter and leave the penthouse. That Izuku will be conducted from and to the teachers' dorms. When Shoyuta was occupied with his own courses, Izuku would be with Nezu, his mother, Midnight, and Present Mike as they were trusted friends of Shoyuta. Shoyuta also explained that even though Izuku's mother will be around for some meals, there will be a possibility that both Shoyuta and Inko will be gone for the night, and he will be watched by once again Midnight, or Present Mike. Izuku knows he will still get to see his mom, but also knows she has her work that keeps her occupied already and now has a brand new house that she wants to get ready for Friday, when Izuku gets to go home. So for the meantime, it will just be Shoyuta and Izuku alone in the penthouse this week, and on occasion one of Shuta's pals. Once the discussion and breakfast was over, Izuku hurried to his room. He sent a quick good morning text to his mom before jumping into the bath. Izuku is happy he is more than grown enough to take one by himself now, so Shoyuta didn't have to step in and give the kid a hand. Once out of the tub, Izuku covers himself in his All Might's robe and rapidly brushes his teeth. He came out of the bathroom with his UA uniform on his arm and carefully put it on his bed. He hears a snigger across the room to see it was Yagi who was chuckling at him. Nice robe, he snickers. Izuku glares and directs a finger to the door before saying, "Out," to the apparition. With his hands lifted, Yagi vanished through the door, leaving the boy to get dressed and prepare his backpack for the day. The last item he needed was his phone that he made sure was completely charged before putting it into his back pocket before racing out of his room to find just in time Nezu coming out of the elevator. Nezu looks at the child beaming with delight, seeing their youngest pupil in history clad in their school uniform, though it seems a tad too large on him. Oh, well, it just allows the child time to grow into it, Nezu surmised. Shoyuta came out of his room clad in his hero attire before accompanying Izuku and Nezu at the lift. Before they departed, Shoyuta whistled, summoning Sumo to come with them. Shout reached up at the hooks that adorned the wall beside the lift. Once Izuku had his shoes on, Shoyuta gave the boy a lead for Sumo, who happily accepted it and attached it on his Sumo's collar. Now already the three, followed by Yagi, departed the dormitories and were making their way to the school along with the other attendees. Most of the high schoolers would pause and stare at Izuku, as he was just a child outfitted in their uniform. And also he was permitted to bring a puppy into the school and not left back at the dorms. Whispers began to spread around them as the student was questioning themselves where this kid came from and why he was here. Izuku could hear them, causing him to lower his head and stare at his feet with a sad expression. Shoyuta noted the difference in the kid's behavior and began to scowl at the UA students, causing them to quiet up or just to run away, as they are all aware that Aizawa-sensei was known to expel people on sight. "Don't give attention to those teens, kid," Shoyuta tells Izuku. "They're just jealous that they aren't talented enough to start as early as you are, so be proud." This cheered Izuku right up, and he lifted up his head and grinned at Shoyuta, which caused the teacher to exhale, because he came to understand that he was whipped for this kid indeed. When they came to a crossroad in the halls, Nezu and Izuku bid Shoyuta farewell. Shout waves at them while strolling away from the two. Nezu takes the lift and leads them up to his office. Once inside, Izuku noticed something was different here. There was a second desk off to the left that is the same size as Nezu, but has a plaque that has Izuku's name on it. There was also a deportable chalkboard not far from the desk that wasn't there before. "You may leave your bag at your workstation. I'm going to show you around now with Sumo, but I assume you don't want to tote your heavy backpack around," Nezu states. Heavy indeed, as Izuku carried all of his notebooks and his school materials with him today. So Izuku happily deposited it off onto the desk before rejoining the Chimera at the entrance. The three of them then strolled all over the campus, or for some sections to a golf buggy for further distant fields. Izuku was astonished at how large the school was, with so many training grounds, gyms, and classes. There was everything and anything to be best suited for all various kinds of quirks. By the end of the tour, classes were already dismissed for the day. Izuku was pleased that Nedza brought lunch and snacks for the boy on their little excursion. Nedza, though, observed that the boy was indeed exhausted by the end of the day, so he drove them back to the teacher's dorms in his golf cart, before bringing the beat Izuku up to the penthouse. Once inside, Izuku crashed on the closest couch and fell asleep right away for a midday snooze. Nedza decided to help himself to the kitchen and began to hunt up some super for the kid and brew some tea for himself. Once the sun was beginning to go down, Izuku woke back up and smelt the food that was already being dished and put at the table. Izuku chose to get up and assist the Chimera with setting the table. Before they got to settle down and enjoy their meal, Shoyuta came out of the lift with a stack of papers in his arm. For the first day of their third term, Shoyuta resolved to make his students cough up essays of what they learned in the last term by the end of the day. Shoyuta was welcomed by a table full of food and plates intended for 3 to consume. Nedza summoned Shoyuta to the dining room to come eat before he shut himself in his office for the night. Feeling relieved that he didn't need to prepare for himself and the kid tonight, Shoyuta consented to join the two at the table. Izuku handed a mug to Shoyuta, which came to an astonishment that it was full to the brim with coffee. Izuku took other mugs to the table filled with tea for both him and Nedzu, and together they enjoyed their dinner. Before the night was over, Izuku found himself in his playroom dressed in his gym attire, giving a go to his parkour jungle gym meant for kids. Nedzu was sitting on a chair off to the side with another cup of tea and his laptop that was brought along, keeping an eye on the child, making sure he didn't harm himself. Dinner was really delicious, Nedzu-sensei. Izuku spoke up while hanging upside down on a bar that was a bit too high off the ground for Nedzu's taste for that kid to be just hanging there like that. Come down from there before you fall on your head, Midoriya-kun, he said, and the child obliged him. I am happy you like tonight's supper. Unfortunately, I am a manual of habit, and I like to eat healthy daily. Izuku looks back to their lunch and snacks, concurring that they were all very healthy, but very delicious. Once you are older, I think it will be in your best advantage to take up a diet where you will build muscle mass easier, the Chimera continued. Why not start now? Izuku asks, prompting Nedzu to stare at the youngster in shock. I mean, I already don't eat junk food like typical kids my age, and I hardly drink anything other than water or milk, so why not put me on a diet now? Maybe it will help me grow bigger, and won't let me be so skinny like I already am. Nedzu grins at the boy's resolve. Only if you are positive, Midoriya-kun, because if it is something you would like to try now, then I will call up your mother tonight and draw up a healthy kids diet for you, and we can get started on it tomorrow. Izuku grins warmly, while nodding his head encouragingly at the notion. Nedza shuts his laptop and glances at the time on his watch, saying, I believe you had enough playtime today, Midoriya-kun. Tomorrow we will go to the gym I have established especially for you, which is outdoors, might I add. Nedza says before motioning the child off, go take a fast shower and get into pajamas. I will be on nighttime duty today, as Aizawa and your mother are far too occupied today. Izuku does what his instructor instructs him and jumps into the open shower and cleans off swiftly with a lot of soup, as he is sweeter than he has ever been before getting into his All Might's onesie, before coming out the bedroom, where he discovers the playroom is already locked up for the night, with even the double doors sealed. The room was darkened, and the stair night light that he had on his desk was on, causing a little light dance on the ceiling to symbolize the galaxy. Nedza dragged Izuku's desk chair closer to Izuku's bed, and he was donning little spectacles and carrying a book in his paws. Come now, Midoriya-kun. I've got the ideal novel for tonight to read. Nedza looks at the youngster. I am too old for bedtime stories, Izuku states with a blush over his freckled cheekbones. Well, then it's a good thing that I brought something more intriguing than just any folk tale, Nedzu says with a smile, holding up a big book, and the title spells out, The Evolution of Quirks, on the cover. Izuku beams with delight and quickly scampers into his bed and is joined by Sumo. And together the boy and the puppy snuggle together as they listen to Nedzu read out the first chapter to them before slumber draws the boy under. Shoyuta was leaning against the door frame with the door to Izuku's room barely ajar, peeking in on Nedzu and Izuku on their nighttime ritual. He wanted to make sure that the Chimera didn't do anything foolish or inappropriate for a 9-year-old kid. He almost stepped in to put a stop to Nezu when he saw the book in his hands, but when he saw how happy it made Izuku, who was anxious to hear from the book, Shoyuta decided to let it pass and watch the boy go to sleep, before decided that he had enough of a break and needed to get back to work. Midoriya Izuku was awakened up again in the morning, but this time by his phone ringing. Rolling to his side where his nightstand was, which caused Sumo to leap out of bed, Izuku glanced at his phone that was on its charger to see it was his mom who was calling. He sits up in bed and yawns before reaching for his phone to answer it. Izuku did speak to his mom last night before he went to bed, but he was pleased nonetheless to hear from her. He takes up the phone and pushed accept on the screen before pushing to his ear. "Morning, Mama," he says with a little yawn leaving from his lips. Inko chuckles on the other end. "Good morning, Aizu," she says. "Did I just wake you up?" "It's all right, Mom. I needed to get up anyway and let Sumo-san out," he says, getting out of bed and put on his slippers. "Don't worry about waking me up in the morning. I would be more than happy to be awakened up like this," he reassures her as he makes his way past his playroom. He sends a brief wave to Yagi-san before opening the glass door, allowing his puppy out to do his morning business. "Well, I am delighted to hear that." He heard his mother laugh on the other end. "I just wanted to let you know that I will have time tonight to enjoy supper with you and Nedza-san. I might as well stay the night, as well, as we must set out early in the morning tomorrow." "Oh, that right?" Izuku thought. Tomorrow is All Might's burial. He moves his head as he felt tears wheeled in his eyes. "Okay, that sounds good, Mom," he spoke back to Inko. "Well, I must be leaving for now. I have meetings all day if I want to be done in time for tonight." Inko describes. "I will see you later today, darling. You have a wonderful day, okay?" "Okay, Mom, you too. Bye," Izuku remarks before hanging up, seeing that Sumo was done with his morning potty. Izuku makes fast work of tidying up after Sumo before turning to the dining room's doors to see Shoyuta was already there with the door open. "Morning, Midoriya." Shoyuta grates the child. "Did your mom inform you on today?" Izuku acknowledges before excusing himself inside to be welcomed with Nezu was in the kitchen making up some food this morning. He must have chatted to Mom about the diet then. Izuku pondered before shifting his attention to Shoyuta. "Yes, she told me she will be here later tonight and spending the night for tomorrow," he tells his teacher. Shoyuta nods. "Nezu will join you and your mother for tomorrow. I still have class, though everyone will have the morning off, so they can watch the broadcast of the burial on TV. It's very kind of Gran Torino to make sure you and your mother have front seats to show tribute to All Might tomorrow." Nedza pipes up from the kitchen, "But none of that for now. Go get ready for the day as I finish up in here." Izuku nods before fleeing to his room. He closed his door before reclining against it. His mind was wheeling about tomorrow, wishing it would never happen, but at the same time desiring it would hasten and pass already so he can be done with it. He adores All Might with all of his heart, but he can't help but feel regretful, relive the recollections of that night. Watching All Might battle that villain, prevailing but succumbing in the end. Izuku is grateful to have encountered his hero when he did, because no matter the result that night, All Might would more likely still be deceased. He did get to meet him, though, and All Might transfer One for All to him as his successor, but the child can't help but to weep at the heavy burden have been placed on his childlike shoulders. Izuku slides down the door, drawing his knees to his chest before burying his face in them and softly weeping into his knees. Yagi-san watched the child collapse in front of him, and with a sad heart the blond man knelt on the ground next to the child. He wishes to console the kid, but what does a dead man say to calm a grieving child? He wasn't sure as he never really engaged with kids, aside from a few greetings and a number of autographs. So he just proceeded to sit by the kid, allowing him calm down on his own. Finally, Izuku looks up and glances at the All Might clock on his wall to see it was already been 10 minutes. So he decided to get up and walk past Yagi-san and into the bathroom to take a fast shower, brushing his teeth, and bring his uniform into his room. This time Yagi-san was gone to give the child his privacy, and Izuku got dressed. He didn't have to prepare his backpack this time, as it was still in Nedza's office, on Izuku's desk. Once out of his room, and into the dining room, both Nezu and Shoyuta were at the table waiting for the boy to join them to dig into their food that was already on the table. The youngster took his place and thanked for the meal before digging in. Both of his teachers gave the boy concerned looks as they can see Izuku's eyes were red and puffy from weeping, But fortunately Nether brought it up, but Nedza made a mental note to call up Hound Dog to ask for an appointment for the child for today and tomorrow. Izuku exited the penthouse with his mentors with Sumo following behind him on his leash. Again at the crossroads in the corridor, Izuku bid Shoyu to farewell before following Nedzu into the lift. Once they made it into the office, Izuku hurried to his workstation, not before he let Sumo off of his leash to explore the office, and unzipped his backpack. The boy pulled out the notebooks he had in there, 6 in total. He left the 2 first back in his room as they were childish scribbles with crayons, and gestured for Nedzu to come take a look. Nedzu was planning to let the day be an easy one, but when he saw the grin and how brilliant it made Izuku's eyes to speak about his notebooks and his analyses, Nedzu understood that the boy was trying to divert himself. That kid needed a distraction, so he wouldn't worry about tomorrow. So with a sigh, Nedzu consented to it, and sat with Izuku looking through the notebooks. And what he discovered was beyond remarkable. They were detailed with both flaws and strengths that the child observed. There were even comments on how each hero could better themselves or power up their moves. Nedza guessed correctly, this kid was indeed a genius. Nedza made a mental note to test the child's intelligence, so he can see where he can start teaching the boy, as obviously his grade and age might be too easy for him. But Nedzu already surmised that by looking at the boy's previous scores, that they were always flawless for assignments and exams, even pop quizzes. So Nedzu will have to begin fresh with the boy to see where to start the bar with academics. So he chose to not breach the subjects today. Instead, he taught Izuku something that will help the boy with his notebooks. He instructed the child how to cipher his work. When it came to Izuku's morning recess, the child grasped most of the gist of the ciphering, which Nedzu expected. Nedzu had the kid follow him to the outdoor that was night outside from Nedzu's office. They had to take the lift down and take an exit to the right, and they were there at a playground that Nedzu had constructed for Izuku. It was pretty much a less rigorous version of the parkour jungle exercise for kids that is in Izuku's play area, with swings added, of course. Izuku saw there were other little toddlers that were too young to be in school yet. Those are some of the teachers' kids we have here on campus, though not all of them reside here, in little homes near the dorms. Nedza describes. Izuku recalls seeing those on their walks from and to the dormitories. Who is with them when their parents are working? Izuku queries. With our hired nannies employees in the daycare, I opened in the building when the dormitories were established. Nedzu says, pointing his paw to the side where seats here positioned with a few women and one guy seated on watching the children play. There was another guy helping a little child on the swings too. I have some tasks I need to do while you're on your break. There is an intercom on the wall, over by the windows, that I will summon you inside with when your break is over. Izuku nods, knowing it was no issue as he recalled his way back to the office. With that, Nedzu left Izuku and Sumo on the playground. Izuku first let Sumo do his job a bit far from the playground so the little kids couldn't smell it. When Sumo was done, Izuku picked up after the puppy before walking back to the playground and asked one of the women who were seated at the benches if they could hold on to Sumo's leash, who took the puppy happily, allowing Izuku to go to the jungle gym. He pulled off his tie and blazer, putting them off to the side before climbing up on the first set of bars. He had to swing his body as he crossed the bars before he landed on a platform. He saw 7 more platforms in the distance he needed to leap across in order to reach the next section of the course, which was swinging platforms. He leaped to the second, then to the 4th, 5th, and 6th. Izuku was bending down ready to make the last, and yet the largest leap yet to the last platform. He launched himself off of the platform, aiming to the 7th, and saw he was going to make it. But there came an issue that Izuku began to observe. He wasn't falling down to the platform, but instead moving up. How was he going up? He starts to panic, and he was flailing his arms and legs, panicking as he was getting higher into the end of the ground. But before he could go any higher, he grabbed onto a bar, making it seem he was doing a handstand on the bar. If it wasn't the clearly death grip the child had on it, with a terrifying look on his face. Help! He shouted to the adults, who immediately got up and rushed over to where Izuku was screaming. Kid! Yagi-san screamed at the frightened child. How is this happening? I don't know what is going on. Izuku shouted back. I can't control it. The adults took this as him informing them and not the spirit that none of them could see who was standing right next to them. One of the men clambered up onto the platform to take hold of Izuku's arms to drag the boy back to the ground. But the boy wouldn't stop floating, so the man kept a hold onto the boy, not knowing what to do next. Back in the workplace, Nedzu was sipping a cup of tea while sorting through some papers. He chose, however, to spin his chair around to peer out the windows to where Izuku should be playing on the playground down below. Taking another sip as he turned around, he saw Izuku hanging on a dear life onto a bar as he was being pulled upwards and a man attempting to assist the child. Nedzu spits out his tea, utterly terrified of the predicament he discovered the child in. He slapped his cup down on his desk before slamming his paw into the intercoms that connected throughout the school, screaming out, "Aizawa, come to the kid district playground right away. We have a code red for special case," before jumping out of his desk and running down to go assist the child outside. Shoyuta was in the midst of a hand-to-hand fighting lesson with his class that morning when the intercom came on with a panicked Nedzu on the other line calling him to the field where Izuku should be playing at the time. A code red for a special instance indicated that Izuku was in life-threatening peril, which means he was being attacked or his quirk triggered out of the blue. Not even saying anything to his pupils, Shoyuta rushed out of the gym, racing to the playground that was on the other side of the school. Getting there as quickly as he could, Shoyuta saw the scenario where the child was literally floating away. Only a man was keeping the child from soaring away, but it seemed the man was fighting on maintaining a hold onto Izuku's arms as the boy began to shriek in pain at the pull of his arms. Shouts swiftly leapt into action as the guy has lost his grasp on Izuku. So with his capture weapon, Shout seized hold onto Izuku, causing the boy to stop flying any higher. Shoyuta had to plant his feet in the earth as he was beginning to be dragged with the child. Quickly turning on his quirk, Shoyuta switched Izuku's quirk off, causing the boy to fall to the ground. But fortunately, the other man that tried to Izuku before was closer to Izuku and grabbed the child before both of them fell to the ground. Shoyuta was huffing, attempting to recover his breath as he let the boy's quirk go, seeing if it would remain off before freeing the boy from his capture device. Nedzu rushes to the boy and pulls the boy off of the man to let Izuku lie on the ground. The boy was passed out, but breathing heavily as the peculiarity must have taken everything out of him. Shoyuta came up to them and picked up Izuku in his arms before sprinting back to the building to the nurse's office where the recovery girl could assist Izuku. Nedzu was hot on the other man's trail as they made their way there. He was exhausted, so very tired that his extremities were heavier than lead. Even his own eyelids were battling against him, but he pushed his eye to open to be greeted to a plain white ceiling and walls. He was resting peacefully on a bed. Finally, his hearing caught up with him, and he could hear 3 distinct voices in the distance. He wanted to turn his head to peer at them, but his muscles wouldn't do as he commanded, but instead a head came into his vision. It was Yagi-san, who appeared beyond concerned. "Are you doing all right there, Zilu-kun?" He questions the child. "What happened?" Izuku was able to stammer out. Yagi-san lifted his eyebrow in bewilderment. "You don't remember?" He questions, but before he could get a response from him, Yagi-san raised his head to peer at the sounds of footsteps that were coming over to the bed, so he swiftly pulled away, leaving behind a bewildered Izuku. It didn't remain that way, though, as 2 other heads came into view. It was both Aizawa-sensei and Nedzu-sensei. "Oh, nice to see you awake there, Midoriya-kun," Nedzu states. "Are you doing okay then, kid?" Aizawa suggests. Izuku attempted to shrug, but his muscles resisted again, which caused him to grimace in discomfort. Both of his instructors' faces morphed into concern. He will be tired for the rest of the day, but after consuming a few gummies of mine and taking his pain medications, he will be right as rain. An elderly woman's voice cried out in the corner, but too far for him to see. Aizawa nods before turning his focus back to the kid. "I'm going to help you sit up, okay?" He lets the kid know. Izuku nods a little bit before Aizawa reaches down and carefully lifts the child up a bit before putting the boy back up on the bed with Aizawa seated behind him, keeping the child upright. Nedzu removes the candies from Recovery Girl, who Izuku could see now. He would be so thrilled to finally meet her if it wasn't for the fact that he felt like a zombie at the time. Nedzu gave the kid a gummy, who nibbled on it slowly. "Do you recall what occurred on the playground today, Midoriya-kun?" Nedzu inquired. Izuku acknowledges, feeling his vigor return on the second gummy. "I was on the jungle gym course when I was jumping across the platforms to reach the next challenge, when someone else quirk triggered, which caused me to float," he says. Izuku, that wasn't someone else's quirk. Shoyu clarified. We have reason to believe it was yours, Midoriya. Nezu explains to the youngster. Izuku stared at the chimera in bewilderment. Do you recall what you were thinking, or even experiencing when you were on the course? Izuku nods, still attempting to comprehend what these two were suggesting. I was attempting to reach the last platform that was further to reach, and I recall thinking, I can do it, before jumping. Izuku describes. Nezu bobs his head, giving the kid another gummy while he was contemplating what this meant for one for all, and how can he explain this without divulging the secret? Did Izuku somehow draw into his previous predecessor's power? If so, then how, and why now? All Might never stated this was an option before, but perhaps he never did because he never knew it was there or reachable for All Might. If that is the case, then why is it accessible for Izuku now? What makes this kid more special, more than he already is, for one for all to develop for him? I need a minute to ponder over this all. Nezu informs Aizawa and Izuku. Perhaps this is another basic piece of Midoriya's power that we have no concept about. But how? Aizawa queries. I thought Gran Torino said he observed Izuku's ability to be a strength holder, not that he had multiple. That is conceivable that Midoriya does just simply have two, as it's prevalent now in his generation, or perhaps there is something convenient we missed that we didn't know was possible for him. Nezu readily lies. Izuku is thankful that he had Nezu to alter the truth for Izuku, as he himself is a terrible liar. I will phone over Gran Torino tonight and perhaps check into Midoriya's family's background to see if there is something there that can give us a hint. Aizawa nodded, realizing this was far more complex now, and knew if someone could work it out, it would be Nezu. However, he also knows that Nezu is also known for twisting the situation or providing only half-truths. But at this time, for the kid's sake, he had to place his trust on the Chimera. I will be taking Izuku back to the dorms and requesting Yamada to handle the remainder of my courses if he is able, and if not, give my student a study time. Is there anything that the child needs to be working on? Nezu nods his head. If he perhaps wants to work on ciphering while I am gone, that would be wonderful. If not, just allow the kid to unwind in front of the TV for the remainder of the day. I will be returning around to bring Midoriya's lunch as his mother, and I have him on a diet at the moment. Aizawa lifted an eyelid. Ciphering? Why would you be teaching a 9-year-old that? 9.5, Izuku mumbles. Also, why is he on a diet at such an early age? He directs an accusing finger at Nezu. You best not be cutting his meals. Niza lifts his paws. Of course not. In fact, once the child is going to start gym class, he will be eating more. He only consumes more nutritious foods, complete of protein and carbs when required. The child already doesn't consume junk food or drink anything other than water or milk with his food. You best be feeding that kid properly, Nezu, or you and I are having a word about curdle points in a child's health production. Recovery Girl speaks up. Don't fret, Recovery Girl, Midoriya-kun, and I will be paying you visits to see if his health is making progress or if there is something I need to alter in his routine or diet. Nezu reassures her. With all said and done, Aizawa and Izuku took Nezu's golf cart back to the dorms, while Nezu was going back to his office to make a few calls and do a little research and planning with Midoriya Inko and Gran Torino. Aizawa parks the golf cart up front of the teacher's residence before assisting the child out, who couldn't help but to stumble with every step. Aizawa frowns before scooping up the child in his arms, noting how the child is far too light for his age, and takes him inside with Sumo trailing in from behind. Once up into the penthouse, Izuku was plopped onto the sofa, where Aizawa switches on some hero cartoons. That was an All Might anime matter of fact, before taking the lounging seat not far from Izuku and plops himself down and settle in to make himself comfortable. Izuku stares at the screen, actually loving this one, but what was coming tomorrow only caused the child heart to hurt by watching this. So instead, the kid flipped through the channels until it came to the new news. But again, there was All Might's smiling face on the screen as they replayed All Might's greatest hits, so Izuku just turned off the TV and curls up on the couch with his head on his knees again. Aizawa looked at the child and felt his own heart shatter for the boy. You don't have to keep it in, kid, he tells Izuku. If you want to speak about it, talk about it. If you were to weep about it, then go on ahead and mourn. I'm not here to judge you, remember? But I can't help you if you don't give me something to work with. Izuku began to sniffle, attempting to hold back his tears, but was failing and couldn't help but to brush them away. Do I have to be a hero? The child inquired, which was a total shock to Aizawa. No, kid. Not if you don't want to be, he told the youngster. I won't force you. Nedzu won't force you, and neither will your mom. Then why am I here? Why go so far for a child who was quirkless just 2 weeks ago? Izuku persisted. Because what occurred to you, and what is still occurring to you, is not your fault, but you shouldn't be alone during it all too. Aizawa clarifies. If you genuinely desire not to become a hero, then we will train you to harness your ability, so it won't hurt you, and you can go do what you want with your life. But can I be honest with you? Izuku nods. I believe you will be a great hero, if you choose to. Aizawa informed him. Izuku shakes his head before continuing. I don't think that I will, he mutters. Why? Because you couldn't save All Might? That you weren't born to use your quirk right when you were born? Aizawa shakes his head. Kid, let's be honest. No one could have rescued All Might that night. Not you, or his teacher, or even the cops and the medics. Do you fault all of them for not saving All Might? Izuku shakes his head again. Then why would you be blaming yourself when you were only 9? Aizawa suggests. 9.5. Izuku mumbles. But because maybe if I did have a quirk right off the start, maybe there would have been a chance. Aizawa sighs. Can't comprehend the children's logic. No, kiddo, I don't believe it would have made a difference if it was another child with a quirk. Besides, because you were there, you did end up manifesting one yourself. Be it may, it will harm you, but you're no longer quirkless. Nothing would have changed, kid. Just that there would be a different traumatized child somewhere out there, and you wouldn't be sitting with me here today, though I do have a feeling I would find you in my class 5 years later. Izuku's eyes widened. Even if I didn't have a quirk? Even without a quirk? Aizawa agrees. Not everyone has a physical quirk, just people who have to work harder. Look at me, all I can do is make the playing field more even for me. But there are still some out there with mutation quirks that I can't even touch, so sometimes I'll just have to fight harder and trust my instinct that I will get out of it alive. Izuku agrees and thinks about that. Yes, it does sound like something he would do. Try to go stronger on his own and get into UA, be it in the hero course or Gen Ed, but either way, Izuku could see himself fighting tooth to nail to come out of this school as a hero one way or another. You're right. I would still want to become a hero even if the odds were against me, he adds. Aizawa smirks. That's what I thought, he says, ruffling the child's hair. Thank you, Aizawa-sensei. The boy thanked his teacher. Shoyuta, his teacher answers back with, causing the child to look at him with confusion. Call me Shoyuta when we are home, all right, kid? Then will you continue to call me Izuku when we are home too? Izuku suggests. Sure. Shoyuta grins. That isn't an issue, Izuku. Thank you, Shuda-san. Evening started to end over the school, and all students were already returned to their dorms even though the teachers weren't done yet, including Nedzu, as he had a meeting with those said teachers, except for the school's guidance counselor, who was in the teacher's dorm up in the penthouse, sitting across a young child who seemed far too excited to see him, as most kids are afraid of him. Hound Dog was very curious about this boy, and that boy appeared poised to start asking questions at 30 miles per hour. Izuku was just a beaming bundle of energy. Hound Dog clears his throat before questioning. Do you fully understand why I am here, young Midoriya? The child shakes his head. No, but I had a hunch it had to do with Nedza-san and Shuda-san not being here. Izuku responds honestly. Hound Dog lifted an eyebrow at the fact that this kid called Aizawa by his given name. I would have assumed Mr. Nedzu would have at least explained to you why I would come and pay you a visit. Izuku's eyes expanded as if something registered on him. Oh, are you the one that I speak to about why I am sad? He questions. Ned-san did tell me something about that, but I had an accident today on the playground, so I was really tired and had a difficult time focusing on what Ned-san was telling me at lunchtime. Hound Dog agrees, hearing about today's episode. That must have been frightening, huh? He queried Izuku. Do you want to speak about it? Izuku shaking his head. It was frightening, but Shuda-san was there to save me and help me calm down when I arrived back home. Hound Dog wrote about how Izuku seems to trust Aizawa, which is wonderful given the child does need a trusted adult when his mother can't always be here. Are you enjoying your new residence here, Midoriya-kun? Please call me Izuku, Hound Dog-san. Izuku persisted. And also, can I be honest with you? Hound Dog nods, urging the kid to go on. I don't really like it here all that much. I mean, it's awesome that Nedza-san built this place for me. My room is huge, with its own playroom and jungle gym and everything. But it's not what I want, if that makes sense, Izuku admitted. Hound Dog is astonished at how well this kid speaks and how trusting he is towards adults. What do you want? Home, whispered Izuku. I mean my old house, my old room, and my old school, where Kaken is. I want to go back to where everything made sense to me. Is there something troubling you here, Izuku-kun? Hound Dog persevered. I am confused about. Why me? Izuku admitted. Why was I the one there that night? Why am I the one that all? Why did my quirk manifest that night? Also, why is all of this for me when I used to be a quirkless, weak Deku? Deku? Questioned Hound Dog. That's the nickname that Kaken gave me. Because I am weak and quirkless, I must be a Deku, replied Izuku. Hound Dog sighs, recognizing he had his job cut out for him with this one. And what worried him even more was the fact this boy is just a child, and yet he already had such deep-seated issues. All right, well, let's start with something with the child you call Kaken, just for today, okay? We can speak about All Might tomorrow night, all right? Hound Dog comforted the youngster. Okay, so you were quirkless until lately, correct? And this buddy Kaken is the one who gave you a nickname that signified weak, right? Izuku agrees. So how is this other kid your buddy then, if you don't mind me asking? Izuku smiles gently and explains, because Kaken and I have known each other since we were little. Our parents are truly best friends. We bonded over our love of heroes, with All Might being our favorite. Izuku clarified. Oh boy, thought Hound Dog when he realized that this kid saw his beloved hero perish, but he jotted that down for a later discussion. Then when was it when he gave you this nickname? When we first began grade school, actually Kaken got his quirk when he was 4 like everyone else, but I didn't. Mom took me to the doctors, and they told us about my pinky toe being a sign I would never get one. Well, Mom told Annie and Kaken, and I overheard them. Izuku begins to pick at his trousers. Everything seemed to see change after that. I guess. He would be mean sometimes and rough on other days, but after that nickname. It was like HES started to dislike me and made sure I remembered he was better. Hound Dog sighed and put his notepad off to the side before getting up and kneeling in front of Izuku. I'm going to be honest with you, Izuku, but Kaken wasn't your friend. It sounds like he was a bully. B but K Kaken W is MIF friend B before. Izuku persisted. HEW's MI only F friend. Hound Dog places a hand on the boy's shoulder, prompting the boy to glance back up at him and say, yes, Kaken might have been a friend before, but he isn't one now, and from what you told me about him, he hasn't been a friend for a long time now. Izuku has begun to weep now. IJ just W wanted to things Tito, Jigo, be back, Tito, in normal. He wept before pressing his forehead into Hound Dog's fur and bawling even more. Hound Dog was startled at the sudden hug, but he chose to draw the kid into an embrace and hold him until he settled down. Izuku came out of his room, newly showered after playing in his gym, to see Nedzu was about to serve supper. Aizawa was seated at the table with papers spread across it, but he was being informed by Nedzu that it was time to set the table. Sighing in relief for the excuse for a break, Aizawa began to gather them all up and transport them back to his room. Izuku entered the kitchen and cleaned his hands before helping Nedzu with the rest of the dishes and collecting additional plates and laying everything out for a table of 4. But Nedzu corrected him, saying there would be 5 today. Curious, Izuku wanted to inquire who else was coming over, but was quickly answered by the elevator dinging and opening to reveal his mom and Gran Torino. Izuku smiles, rushing to embrace his mother and shaking Gran Torino's hand before leading them to the set-up table. Aizawa came back out as well, leaving the remainder at the table. Nedza gestured for everyone to settle and enjoy their meal. Izuku offered thanks to his meal like the grown-ups before digging into the akazuki that was served for the night. So as promised, I did the digging into Midoriya's history, with Midoriya-san's approval, of course, and came up with some rather interesting discoveries. Nedza says with a grin, bringing a folder out. Out of where? Who knows? I was also surprised what came to light, as I knew something similar occurred to my grandfather, but had no notion it went further into the line of our ancestors. Inko lied masterfully. What do you mean this is typical for your family? Aizawa suggests. I assume 2 quirks were only in this generation that began exhibiting signs of them. No, Midokun doesn't have numerous quirks, Nedza says. It's an energy stock pillar. He is gathering enough energy that causes him to be able to do some intriguing things with his quirk. Wait, hold up. Store up energy? Aizawa remarks. So not only does this quirk cause a strength boost, but can it allow him to fly as well? Izuku put a slice of pork in his bowl as he was intrigued how Nedzu and his mom could lie there. Way out of this one. Thankfully, he chose to keep his head down and continue to consume his food, allowing the grown-ups to hash this out. More like a float, Nedzu replies. He can control the energy and wind around him to cause himself to levitate, like how Midoriya-san's quirk allows her to transport small items to herself, which is rather fascinating. However, that is not the most interesting thing that came out of all the research that I did. Aizawa was not fully persuaded as he withdrew the folder from Nedzu and began to read the context inside, only causing his eyes to widen. The ones who had this quirk in this family didn't realize they had the quirk until they fulfilled the requirements for them to endure it, he asks. What does that mean? Well, that's just what we are already preparing to do with Midori-kun, replied Nedzu. No, I get that, but what does this particularly imply for Izuku? Some of his relatives couldn't contain their quirks until they were teenagers or near adulthood. So why did Izuku's peculiarity come out now? Aizawa was worried. Well, because he merely wished to save his beloved hero, of course, Nedzu says quietly, prompting Izuku to halt eating when he felt all eyes on him, but he kept his head down. Izuku wasn't intended to have his quirk reveal itself until he had enough power to harness it, and if he never did, then it would simply never show itself, implying that if he never encountered All Might, Izuku would have been quirkless. But because of how frightened he was that night and frantic, his quirk came out to defend Midoriya-kun, even though he was far too young or fragile to hold on to it. Izuku wanted to chuckle cruelly because everything that Nedzu was saying had truth in it. The hidden quirk being All Might's private quirk, and how it wished to defend Izuku, was All Might prevailing against that villain, and being too immature and weak to control the quirk, being that Izuku was the only one there to be able to have it transferred onto him. Even though obviously he shouldn't have had it to begin with. But there arises an issue with this quirk, continued Nedzu. Being that there is already an unseen element that made itself known today, it could mean that Midoriya's quirk is a wild card, meaning that we have no idea what he can do next with it. The night concluded with hardly any more shocks, and it came to be bedtime for Izuku. Inko chose to join in on the bedtime reading that Izuku insisted on being called as he still thinks he is too big for bedtime stories. Izuku and Sumo were on his bed, while Inko took the end of Izuku's bed to recline and listen. Nedza draws the chair near once again to the bed and begins to read the book from the other night, until Izuku fell asleep, which is when the adults excused themselves from Izuku's room. Inko insisted that Gran Torino remain the night as well, but he refused, saying he has a few last arrangements to get through before tomorrow and would wish the other good night before departing. Nedzu also excused himself and took the lift down with Gran Torino. Inko found herself alone in the living room as Aizawa fled to his room when supper was done. So she chose to head to her own room and began to settle in for the night. Morning arrived far too quickly as Izuku discovered his All Might alarm going off. Izuku gets up from his bed and does his usual routine, though instead of taking his uniform from the wardrobe, he instead grabs a basic black suit and takes it to his room. Once dressed, he joins the others for a short breakfast before Inko, Nedzu, and Izuku go to get into the vehicles that was waiting for them. He was puzzled why there were 3 of them, but Nedzu explained to the boy that one of them had protection just in case. So shrugging, Inko and Izuku took the center car, while Nedzu took the back one. Inko felt strange about how they were driven to the funeral. The journey there was uneventful, as were the streets, and the city itself was uncomfortably quiet. They had to be transported all the way to Tokyo, where the burial would be conducted in the mighty agency main building. Once they did get there, the building was crowded with reporters, and it went as long as it went down from multiple streets in each way. A bodyguard emerged out of the car with the Midoriya family, and helped push the meteor away, allowing the boy and his mother go in with little to no difficulty, though fortunately no one knows Izuku or why he was there, so there shouldn't be any coverage on him or Inko. Gran Torino was ready for Midoriya, who was also clad in a suit, and he guided them inside where the reception was being held. Rows upon rows lined the entire area, and once Izuku and Inko reached the front, it felt less congested. Izuku looks to the very front to see an urn that must be what is housing All Might's ashes. There was an enormous portrait of All Might in the rear, towering over the entire room. But that wasn't what grabbed his attention. No, it was the portrait that was next to the urn that was adorned with flowers. It was a picture of Yagi-san, who is still directly beside him. The young boy halted in his steps, feeling the world around him begin to whirl, and his own pulse grow too loud for his own hearing as he continued to stare at the image. He could hear his mother beside him attempt to console Izuku and coax him to continue to follow her to their seats. But Izuku couldn't hear anything else until a voice to his right cried out, "Izuku," which prompted Izuku to snap out of it and turn to the spirit of his beloved hero. The same hero who Izuku witnessed die. Tears began to flood Izuku's eyes. Izuku didn't care to utter a word to anyone once they returned to campus. He just quietly excused himself before shutting himself in his room. He took off his tie and suit blazer, setting them carefully on his bed before saying, "Why didn't you say who you are?" Yag. No, All Might stood in front of the kid with his lips open like a gaping fish, wishing to say something but couldn't. "Why didn't you tell me that you were All Might?" Added Izuku. "Did you find this funny? Funny to watch me mourn over you, while you were still right in front of me." "Izuku-kun, keep your volume down, please," implored All Might. "The others can overhear you." Izuku emits a humorless chuckle. "That's what you got to say to me? These are your first words to me? Please, my boy." All Might pleaded with the child. "Save it," snapped Izuku. "Nedza made my room soundproof to give me privacy. Unlike you, others are truly considerate towards me." Izuku's remarks were both so grown up beyond the child's years, and yet that reality caused All Might to hurt even more. "I am sorry," he says. I wanted to tell you so much, but I didn't know how." "So you thought me finding out at your funeral was a better choice?" Izuku blamed All Might. "No." All Might raised his voice, but soon settled down. "No, I was afraid of hurting you, Izuku. I was afraid of what me telling you who I am would do to you. You already had so much already on your plate, so much that changed overnight, and I couldn't be another cause for you crying. You have a lot going on, but one of those things was that I felt alone. All Might." Izuku begins to cry. "I was already frightened and sad that the one person who could be helping me, the one person who should be helping me, has died." All Might wanted to reach out to comfort the child, but once he began to reach out, he recalled he couldn't touch Izuku. "I wouldn't have cared if this was all that I got of you, All Might." Izuku continues motioning to All Might, "because I would still have you. As corny as it might sound, but I wouldn't have cared to have you in spirit." Izuku, All Might attempted to commence. "Please leave," Izuku said. This tore All Might apart. "Please, my boy, don't make me abandon you. I can't. I want to remain by your side. I am not asking you to remain away indefinitely, All Might, but I need space." Izuku states, "So please just go. Right now it's just too painful to see you right in front of me." All Might acknowledges and begins walking towards Izuku's door, but before he departs, Yagsen turns to the child one more time, saying, "For what it's worth, I am sincerely sorry, Zenin." Izuku did not reply. He didn't even turn to look at the deceased hero, so All Might left him alone in his room. The child fell to the floor sobbing. Evening fell over UA, and supper arrived and went. Izuku requested to be left alone as he wasn't hungry. So Inko left a dish by his door, hoping her son would come out and eat. Finally, Hound Dog was able to visit the penthouse, as it has been a chaotic day, with many pupils arriving to pay him a visit today. He sees the tray of food at the boy's door and picks it up, noting it was cold. He rapped on the door and heard a muffled "come in" on the other end, so he walks in to find Izuku newly cleaned and into regular jammies, and not his usual hero onesies, seated on his bed with Sumo whimpering from the floor. The boy's hair was soaked as his head dangled low, allowing drips to fall onto his bed linens. Hound Dog put the dish of food on the boy's desk before picking up an abandoned towel resting behind the boy and began to dry Izuku's hair for him. I realize that today has been rather difficult, and for you, it has been what you might consider a nightmare. Hound Dog spoke first. You don't have to be all right today, or even tomorrow. Hell, if you choose to, take as much time as you want and need to grieve. There is no timetable for grief. But that's not what he would have wanted, spoke Izuku in a subdued manner. And I don't think it's something I want to do either. Then what do you want? Hound Dog in bravery the child. It is very essential to know what you want and your boundaries. Izuku glanced back at the very big dog, thinking about what he said before responding. I want to be able to smile like All Might has done, but not because I'm faking it or anything, but because I want to be at least okay. Hound Dog laughed. You know what? That is a fair one, kid. He ruffles the boy's green locks. I must confess, you are the most mature client that I had the honor to work with. And that says a lot, given I work in a high school, and you're only 9.5, muttered Izuku. My apologies, laughed Hound Dog, but he went back to being serious. Can you be honest with me for a second? What did you feel once you arrived there at the funeral service? I felt regretful, because he was gone, said Izuku, angry at myself for not being able to save him. Even though it's illogical for a 9.5 child to be able to go up against a villain, he looks to Hound Dog, who nods with confidence. I was also angry at All Might for not informing me anything before he died. Angry he couldn't have been here with me if my quirk is similar to his and developed because of that night. I am furious that he should be here right now in this room talking to me, even though I probably won't want him around because of guilt, and I feel guilty that I feel this way. Hound Dog nods. All of those that you are experiencing is justified. Izuku-kun, he says, just know I am not going to offer you false assurances, because I have a sense that you wouldn't even believe me if I told you because it will be too illogical for you. But I can assure you that it is up to you whether you are going to be all right. That you and others around you will have to put in the effort in order for you to be okay. What do I have to do? Inquired Izuku. Well, it won't be easy, Hound Dog informs him. You will have to open up and speak to those adults and peers around you. Discover new normality where you are now. If there is a day that you don't feel okay, then you need to speak up and inform your mom, Aizawa, or Nedzu. You need to communicate with those around you. Izuku groans. It's hard to speak to adults, he admits, because they are hard at listening to what I tell them. What? Asked the Hound Dog. Who wouldn't listen to you? My teachers, Izuku replies. When Bakugo would be mean towards me, or just the other kids, I did try in the beginning to tell them, but they made me feel it was my own fault. I promise I tried not to listen, because it wasn't logical. What about your mother? Hound Dog queries. Of course, I told her the most, but she is becoming sadder and worried about me, Izuku adds. So I stopped not long ago, so she wouldn't cry when she saw me hurt. No, Hound Dog states firmly. Don't do that. Never hide your pain, especially if you are hurt or being bullied. Those teachers are wrong, and they will find out very soon that they were in the wrong to neglect a kid in need, quirkless or not. He comforted the child. Promise me you won't hide anything any longer. I will make sure that you are in their charge, and will show you that you can trust them. Izuku nods. Okay, I promise if you promise that they will listen to me. I promise. The last 2 weeks passed in a blur, and Midoriya Izuku did his best with his new studies and exercise. Every morning he gets up, gets dressed, eats, and departs with Nedzu, and sometimes Aizawa. Does his morning studies, which were more challenging for the 9.5-year-old, as Nedzu made sure to modify the boy's academic needs to the boy's IQ. Have his morning break, with a few additional safeguards. Have his mid-morning studies, then lunch with Nedzu. After lunch is strength training time with Gran Torino and Aizawa. Once school was over, Izuku will go back to the dormitories with a teacher, or sometimes his mom, who got done with her job early. Once at the penthouse, Izuku would be in his room, completing the rest of his schoolwork for the day, while having some refreshment to Inko's insistence. Then play at his own gym before bathing and joining the others for dinner. Then it was nighttime reading, sometimes with Nedzu or Inko, but recently, Izuku found himself alone in his room with Sumo and reading from the books on his own until he fell asleep. 3 times a week, Hound Dog would pay a visit to Izuku, to continue to speak to the child and make sure he is adjusting to his new routine and home. Though he did discover something rather problematic. The kid was always playing alone. So on his next break, while Izuku was on his own, Hound Dog marched up to Ned's office requesting some time from the Chimera to talk about Izuku. I realize you have little knowledge or even experience with human children, but they depend on social interactions with children their own age. Isolating the child is not beneficial for anyone, insisted Hound Dog. Ned's groans. I am already aware of this fact, and so does Aizawa and Midoriya-san, but we seem to have our hands bound as none of us have an idea as to where we could locate such a kid that would be trusted around Midoriya-kun. Explained Nedzu, but please don't fret, as I am working on attempting to locate someone, or ideally numerous, to become playmates for. Midoriya-san, Hound Dog could only wipe his eyes hearing how Nedzu was making this into more of a scientific project than a real need for a kid. If we don't move quickly, then we could accidentally cause this child to be antisocial, which will make matters worse for him. I comprehend. Perhaps I need to seek somewhere different and make a call to an old acquaintance, Nedza said in thought. Is there someone in mind? Inquired Hound Dog. Perhaps. Do you recall All Might's first sidekick? The Chimera inquired. Well, David Shield does have a daughter who should be around Izuku's age, who is also intelligent. So perhaps Izuku would appreciate talks with her. Hound Dog pondered over this. I am not sure how this might work, as the Shields reside in the Island, he said. Well, as you know, Midoriya-kun's protection is our top concern, and Island has the top-notch security in the world. Come on, Squirt. Is it the quickest you can go? Called Gran Torino, who witnessed the child rope climb up off a wall on an obstacle course. No, sir, cried Izuku, who was huffing and wheezing while attempting to speed up the pace to reach the summit quicker. Come on, kid. I could beat you up there, and I already have 1 foot in the grave, mocked the elderly man, causing Aizawa to glare down at him. Must you torment him? Aizawa questioned Torino. He is just a kid. Oh, please. This is me being polite. Besides, the child has you here to coddle him. Someone has to be the bad cop here. Torino maintained that just prompted Aizawa to roll his eyes. Finally, Izuku reached the summit of the wall and was set to go to the high-up monkey bars over the foam pit below. Izuku had to leap over in order to reach the first bar and swing his body, so he is able to pass over the next bar. Eventually, at the end of them, Izuku found himself on the platforms again and skipped across them with little difficulty, but when he went to the last and biggest leap again, Izuku found himself floating again. Dang nugget, cried Izuku as he got himself to turn upside down by going up to the roof with only the harness holding him from going all the way up. That's the additional safeguard, a harness that runs across the outdoor playground and the gym to prevent Izuku from floating away too far. Aizawa groans and climbs over to the platforms to be under the boy and triggered his own quirk, removing the boy's quirk in the process, causing the boy to fall downwards but being caught by Aizawa. Seems we need to think of a better solution for you, whacked-out quirk, he says to Izuku. No doubt, declares Torino. It's tricky to get you to complete 1 round of the course without you flying away. Aizawa carries the child down and away from the obstacle course and places him in front of his instructors. We need to find out a method for you not to be able to activate your quirk. No, that's a stupid idea, says Torino. No, what we need to do is assist the squirt to regulate it rather than holding it all in. There could be a hazardous backlash in doing that. So what? We give the child a helmet and have him to go at it, countered Aizawa. Not a terrible idea. Torio snapped his fingers at the idea. Only one other issue. You can't fly. And I can only jet myself so far into the air and can't remain aloft for extended periods as Izuku can. Aizawa slabs his forehead at this man's idiocy. Exactly. Aizawa snaps at the elderly guy. Neither of us can keep up with him, so allowing him to float on his own, even in a helmet, is dangerous. So why not ask another hero to do it then? Asked Torino, which prompted Aizawa to halt. What? There are a number of heroes that can soar, right? Why not get one of them down here for a week at a time and teach the kid, proposed Torino. At this, Aizawa didn't have any objections. Finally, Izuku's day concluded as he and Sumo made their way back to Izuku's room ready to cuddle and read another fascinating book that Nedza gave Izuku. Slipping under his blankets, Izuku shut off the majority of the lights in his room, except for his reading lamp that hovers over his bed. "May I speak to you for a minute, my boy?" asked All Might, who materialized in front of Izuku's bed. Izuku shrugs, nodding and putting his book off to the side. "I've been intending to speak with you too, All Might," he says. "Please just call me Yagi-san again. I'm Yagi Torshinori before I am All Might, and this," motioning to himself in a less muscular form and his more fluffy golden hair, "is my real form. How were you able to go from this form to being, well, All Might?" Izuku questions. "I mean, you were still the same height, but All Might was larger than life, and you were just someone who I wouldn't even take a second look at if I saw you on the street. You know how when swimmers will make themselves appear fitter and larger at the pool?" Yagi-san adds, "Well, I am like that. The whole purpose of my normal physique is that no one will spot me, so I am able to go out and do normal human activities without being ambushed at every corner." "What about the hair?" inquired Izuku. "Hair gel, but on automatic? Don't question it, my boy." Izuku couldn't help but laugh, but then grew quiet again. "I'm sorry for screaming at you," he apologizes. "No, my boy. I'm sorry for being a coward and not telling you who I am from the beginning." Yagi-san states, "I should have known better than to have you find out on your own, but I realize where you were coming from," insisted Izuku. "I mean, how insane it is that I can see the guy who died in front of me, who also gave me their quirk, that can evidently be passed down, and has been passed down for decades." Izuku drifted off for a minute before asking, "Wait, is that why I can see you?" "Because I have your quirk." "Honestly, Zukakin, your guess is as good as mine." Yagi-san shakes his head. "This never happened to me when I became my master's successor. Even if she was with me as I am with you, well, I couldn't see her, as you can see me now." Izuku was confused by this knowledge, as it only caused him to have more questions rather than answers. But he reasoned to start from the beginning. "Why me?" he concluded. "Why to give a quirkless kid your quirk? Honestly, I had no clue you didn't have a quirk, but it turned out to be the best. But why did I choose you?" Yagi-san claimed the end of Izuku's bed to recline on to get closer to the child. "Because of how brave you were, my boy. Also how kind and brave your heart is. Most children would be in too much shock to attempt giving a hand, or to even try to save someone who was dying. Not you, though." Izuku was nervous to pose his next inquiry. "So it wasn't because I was the only one who could carry your quirk that night?" "Of course not, my boy." Yagi-san gives a comforting grin to the boy. "To be honest, if you didn't do what you did that night, then Plan A, to what if I died, would have carried on like planned." "Plan A?" questioned Izuku. "Yes, well, Night Eye and I took additional steps to make sure One for All had a successor if something went wrong that night. I handed Night Eye cuts of my hair and samples of my blood, so he may locate a successor in my position and educate them." Yagi-san clarified. "But you were there that night, and what made me make up my mind was the smile you gave me when you realized it was a hopeless case to save me that night, my boy. My master once told me that the day you are rescuing someone will be the worst day of their lives for them, and all you can do is reassure them and offer them solace by smiling. So always remember to smile." "You instructor sounds like a lovely person." Izuku asks, "What happened to them?" "She's gone, my boy," Yagi-san says with a heavy heart. "She died as I did, by all for one. But this time, that monster is gone, and you are safe. I can't tell you how happy I am that I was able to take that monster out before handing on One for All to you." "I am happy about it too," confessed Izuku. "I just wish it didn't cost your life in the process." Yagi-san shakes his head. "Believe me when I say that I would do everything the same I did that night if it meant I got to meet you before I died. Even now, though I am not all here, and I can never touch your fluffy hair, I will accept what I am given." Izuku laughs, happy that they chose to have this most important discussion. "I will gladly take this too, Yagi-san." "Wait, does that mean Sir Night Eye could still pass One for All to another with the samples you gave him?" "No, not when I already passed it on to you." "Does he know that?" "Yes, I explained how it worked with him." "Do you believe he might still try?" "Possibly. I don't like him. I'm sorry, my boy." Midoriya Izuku stands in front of a man clad in a white jumpsuit. He has short, wavy golden hair and brown eyes. On his bare feet were wings on his ankles. Aizawa and Gran Torino stand off to the side, enabling the boy to meet the pro hero. You must be Midoriken that Nedza told me about, the man pipes up. My name is Yamamoto Daiki. I'm a sidekick named Mercury. Because your quirk is similar to the Greek god Hermes? Izuku suggests. The guy throws his head back in laughter. Smart one that you are, he praises the youngster. The agency I work for is at Hawks. Principal Nedza told me he had a unique case with a child who has the ability to float but can't seem to control it. Are you here to teach me more than Yamamoto-san? Izuku suggests. Sure am, kiddo. Yamamoto ruffles the child's green locks. However, not today, as I need time to finish some of my own tasks in order to free up some time. Though you will see me soon. Izuku nods before bowing. It's nice to meet you, Yamamoto-san. The man nods before taking to the air, waving once more to the kid before taking off to wherever he was required. Aizawa observes the guy leave, remembering when he came to this school, but he was already in his second year when Aizawa joined. So this is what Nedza had in mind to educate the squirt. Torino remarks. Aizawa looks to Izuku before stating, get hooked up to your harness and do another lap on the obstacle course, getting a nod from the kid who runs off to do what he was instructed. It seems so, he addresses Torino. Though I can see why, the way he flies is akin to how Midoriya-kun floats. Mercury can show Izuku how to stay upright and control his movements in the air. You know, I never heard of that man until today. Gran Torino. Most wouldn't, as he hasn't had a huge debut. He is more down to earth like his employer. Aizawa shrugs. When the boy was done in his gym work, Aizawa led the boy back to the penthouse but didn't even care to sit down for the evening, as it was Friday and Izuku gets to go home to his mom's for the weekend. Besides, Aizawa and Inko need to have some discussion about the impending trip to Ai Island in the summer. Aizawa won't be able to join the family to the Ai Island as he is training camp with his own class. Izuku rushes to his room and drops his school bag before digging out a duffel bag to prepare for the weekend. I can't wait to be able to escape the penthouse for a while, he tells Yagi-san. I bet. Yagi-san chuckles. I can't fathom being cooped up in the school or here in this penthouse for a week. Izuku sighs. More like I can't wait to get away from the training and the schoolwork for a little break. Yagi-san frowns. Are you finding it too challenging doing all of this? He asks the boy. No, but I am still a kid. Izuku grins. I just can't wait to get out from under my teacher's thumb. Yagi-san chuckles at the boy's antics. I get it now. Izuku finishes packing his bag before heading to the elevator where Aizawa was waiting for him. He pats his leg a few times, motioning for the now larger puppy to follow him again. Sumo gets up from the dog bed he was resting on as he does not accompany his owner to the gym, but Sumo also seemed thrilled to be able to leave the campus grounds along with his boy. The walk is never long, as they follow the paved path that Nedzu had built so Izuku wouldn't get lost in the woods, and they found themselves out in front of a small Japanese-style cottage home. Izuku hurries inside, leaving Aizawa behind. Izuku hurriedly takes off his shoes and runs to the kitchen net, where he finds his mother, making yaki udon for supper. Izuku runs behind his mother and embraces her. Inko yelps, startled by the sudden attack from her son. She couldn't help but to laugh as she ruffled her son's green hair. You know better to sneak on someone who is cooking. Now go on and settle back into your room and unpack. She brushes off the kid who pouts but knows he needs to let her finish cooking. So he does what he is requested and runs to his room with Sumo close to his heel. Aizawa eventually made his way inside and went to greet Inko. Sorry for the intrusion, he says. Ah, Aizawa-san. Dinner's almost ready if you wouldn't mind preparing the table. She welcomes Izuku's teacher. The gruff man nodded, doing as he was told. Izuku rejoins the adults, but not before releasing Sumo outside in his fenced area, so the dog could do his business as the humans eat. Inko hands Izuku his portion, motioning the child to go sit down while Aizawa takes his own from the woman, and all three sits down to eat. Izuku-kun's finals will be over by Thursday next week, so Friday will be free for you two to have the day to pack. Aizawa begins to speak. Inko sighs. She has a hand up to her face as she looks to the side in concern. I'm afraid I might not be able to accompany Izuku yet on the trip by then, she says, causing Izuku to turn to his mother with sadness in his eyes. Why not? He suggests. Because the weekend when we are to depart, I will have a 2-day meeting that I can't seem to skip. I will have to be there in person, I'm afraid, she says. Izuku looks down at his meal, fighting off his tears, feeling overwhelmingly disappointed, but he knows it's not her fault. I'm sorry to hear that, though you don't need to fret, as Izuku can go before you with Nezu, and you can join them once you are able to. Aizawa reassures her, which allows her to relax a bit, as she really wants her son to meet this girl, so he may finally have a friend around his own age. Don't worry too much about it, Zuko. She smiles at her son. I know you wanted me to be able to come with you when you meet Melissa-chan, but I will get done as quickly as possible, so I can finally be up there with you. As promised, Izuku was indeed done with his finals with Nezu-san by Thursday, and did a wellness check with Recovery Girl and Aizawa-san. To everyone's surprise, the child expanded considerably, and he is now on pace to reach his typical, age-appropriate height. Recovery Girl had to give it to Nezu that Chimera certainly knew what he were doing when it came to Izuku's health. When Friday finally arrived, it was time for the summer excursion to Ai Island. Izuku was prepared to enter security and was packed. Izuku, Midnight, and Hound Dog allowed their luggage to be transported as Inko and Aizawa stood to the side of the child. Izuku rushes to offer his mother and teacher hugs as he turns to face them. I swear I'll be there with you next weekend. Reassuring her baby was Inko. I'll be there the week of your birthday, too. Make careful to listen to Nezu and Hound Dog, but also to have fun, Aizawa advises the youngster. Inko agrees by nodding. Hello, how about I? Ask Midnight. I'd rather the child disregard you than to listen to you. Aizawa snaps back at his colleague. Izuku-kun can be watched over by Hound Dog just fine, so I continue to argue with Ned's request that you accompany him. In most cases, I would concur. With the world on its side, with the amount of crimes these past few months, I could never disagree with more security when it comes to Midoriya-kun, Nedza declares as he approaches the gathering. I can't thank you enough for all you have done for my son. To the Chimera, Inko bows respectfully. I would do anything for this boy to ensure his bright future, says Nezu, shaking his head and raising a paw. Before turning to Izuku, Midnight, and Hound Dog, he reassures the mother. You may enter our aircraft now. He then addresses his fellow travelers. Izuku nods sadly, not wanting to leave his mother and teacher, but understanding that they are acting in his best interests and that he will return to UA for the third term. Izuku breaks away from Inko and Aizawa with a heavy heart, taking Nezu's offered hand as he was being led away while still waving goodbye to those who couldn't come with him just yet. The aircraft was a private one that was opulent. No matter if it's for his own benefit or Izuku's, Nezu never takes the easy route. The boy was writing something in the sketchbook. He appeared to be sketching it across from Nezu, so that the invisible All Might sitting beside him could read what he was saying and respond to the boy with any queries Izuku might have for him. Izuku, though, was careful to make it seem he wasn't staring at Yagi-san's, or to be seemingly pausing while letting Yagi-san answer, so he would doodle while his predecessor answered him. I'm nervous about meeting him, David Shield. Izuku recognized. I want him to like me. Obviously, he will, my boy. Dave, Yagi-san chuckled. In reflection, Yagi-san sighs. I miss my dear old buddy. Before I passed away, I wished I could have had another meeting with him and his daughter. Izuku scowls, but he still appears to be concentrating on the sketch of All Might that he was making just before he scribbled. I'm sorry you couldn't have seen him again in person. The youngster feels sympathy for the fallen hero. Is there anything you want me to tell him about? The last thing I would want is for them to believe I still hang around, or worse, that you went insane. Yagi-san groans as he shakes his head. No, and besides, I'm the one to blame because I didn't reach out when I knew I should have. A hero's existence is not always assured to be a lengthy one. Why didn't you? Izuku queries reach out? That is, why didn't you ever get in touch if you missed him and Melissa-chan as much as you claim? While feeling a little as though his privacy was being slightly invaded, Yagi-san only looked at the child and had to tell himself that this was just a young child. Since children don't develop a sound filter until they are much older, the youngster doesn't really know any differently. He spoke calmly. I could not also promise everyone's lives to those who wanted to be close to me when it came to All for One, because it was too risky to have people close to me when I was living. Another thing for which I am thankful is that now that the beast is dead, you will never have to express yourself. Izuku ceased his writing and sketching as soon as he heard All Might's remarks to him. Izuku has always loved and admired this man, but he has never understood how lonely his existence must have been. He states out loud, "I wish that it didn't have to be like this," without noticing it until it was too late. "Like what?" questioned Nezu. Izuku realizes his error as he peers up. He immediately lies, that I couldn't have met them without All Might. All I want is for him to be here with us too. Ned's eyes soften as he looks down at the boy's notebook and notices a drawing of the hero, as well as some sentences that were written in the boy's private cipher. He taught All Might this one for private conversations. Nedzu assumes that these are notes the boy came up with to add to his most recent notebook, because he also sees a drawing of the hero himself. "I also desire that for you," he said. Nedzu fess up. "Even though we must keep moving forward, that doesn't mean we can't pause occasionally and reflect about people who aren't physically present with us. After all, as humans like to say, you can always hold them in your heart, as I like to believe I do for my former college." Izuku nods as the child looks at the chimera with a grin on his face. He remarks, "All Might must have meant a lot to you as well, Nedza-san." Nedza smiles faintly as she stares longingly out the window. "Certainly, Yagi-kun meant a great deal to me. He was one of the people who supported me back in our day, when others only saw me as an abomination. A beast that needs to be destroyed." Nedzu elucidates, "I was just an animal attempting to find my way in this harsh world, while he was just a student back at UA. Even though I was only a library, I was able to enlist in UA as a staff member with his help and support. And now look at me. The principal here." Izuku chuckles at the chimera's behavior. "Glad he was able to support you when he could." "Me too." Standing in front of a brunette man with a little blonde girl that seems to only be a year or two older than Izuku was what welcomed the domestic Japanese that came to Island. The brunette man, David Shield, looks down at the green-eyed boy who refused to look up from his red shoes and couldn't stop toying with the rim of his shirt. The kid was not much of a looker, David had to concede. But he must recall the trauma that this child already experienced by witnessing David's old friend die directly in front of this 9-year-old. So he grinned compassionately at the child, welcoming carefully with, "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Midoriya-kun," in Japanese, so the boy could understand him. "No need to speak to us in Japanese, Mr. Shield." Nedzu addresses this in English. "I'm teaching Izuku English, and the best way to learn it is to speak it, and hear it be used." David nods in comprehension, and having the boy's instructor speak up, he finally glances up with bashful green eyes and says, "In nice meeting you, Mr. S. Shield," he says in English, "Me, Izuku Midoriya." Not flawless English, but quite remarkable nonetheless. "It's a pleasure to have you here, Midoriya-kun." David's grin is broadened and genuinely real. "Call me Izuku," the youngster urged David. David led the party further into the island to a private contemporary American house that Nedzu asked for the Japanese folks to reside in during their visit in the summer. Nedzu permitted the child to run off to investigate the home with Hound Dog directly behind him. Midnight also took it as her cue to go unload and settle into their arrangement. "Have you looked into the requests I sent over last month?" Nedzu urged David. "I have, but we only worked out a beta test that has only been tested twice. As you can guess, there aren't many that want us messing with their quirks." David replied. Nedzu nods in retention. "How did the HPSC take the drug?" he inquired. Concerned, David responded honestly. But after showing Izuku's file and explaining how this can be used to help him and future children if they are in similar situations or just born with a quirk that is beyond their control, the board agreed to name this the Midori phenomenon. Nedza chuckled at the moniker. "It fits considering that Midoriya-kun is a special case," he says. "How much longer until the final product?" "Well, now Izuku is with us, hopefully soon," he adds. "I can only hope this is what you were looking for, so that kid won't be in danger because of this manifested quirk." As the two talked, neither noticed or could even see the blonde man watching them in the corner of the room, listening to their conversation. But as Yagi-sen listened, hope bloomed in his chest as the chimera and his old friend had a plan to help Izuku use One for All without the child hurting or worse, killing himself. Izuku found himself in a playroom alone with Melissa, who was at the table working on what seemed to be schoolwork, which puzzled Izuku as it was summer vacation. He understands Japanese schooling is unique, but she is American. They are meant to have the full summer off. He wished to inquire, but had a hard time putting the words together to talk English with the girl. Even if he did, it felt as if his own tongue was as heavy as a rock. So instead, he perched on a couch and took a book about America's heroes and chose to distract himself with it instead. However, the book grabbed Melissa's interest at the angle of her eye. "Do you like heroes?" she questioned to greet it. Izuku heard her and caught like and heroes, so he nodded. "Want to learn more American heroes?" he manages to say, though hearing his terrible English and dialect made him cringe. Melissa's eyes brighten, along with a grin across her cheeks. She puts her pencil down and joins the boy on the couch. Slowly, she chatted about what she knew about each figure in the book and would repeat some, where Izuku had difficulty comprehending her. Right then and there, a friendship developed as the two bonded over their passion for heroes. The next day, the older girl had Izuku by the hand as she dragged the greenet around the food shops where she wanted Izuku to sample all of the American cuisine he could before summer was over. After lunch at a hamburger shop, the two discovered themselves at a park where the two played tag with one another. Midnight, dressed in civilian attire to not attract notice to themselves, sat on a neighboring bench while observing the children play. When the sun went low, midnight guided the children back to the house, where Izuku and Melissa sat at the table together doing additional summer worksheets that Melissa loves to do, so she won't forget what she learned over the summer. So Izuku requested for his own, and Nedza gladly gave the child a few of the worksheets he made for him. When supper was over, Izuku said goodbye to Melissa as she was taken back to her own house with her parents. This was how the first week at Island proceeded for the 9-year-old boy. And when the weekend arrived, so did his mom as promised. Nedza let the young mother settle down in the shared home before he invited Izuku and Inko to join him in a meeting with David Shield as the two visionaries described their plan to assist Izuku and to enable him to use his peculiarity without backlashes. "I've taken the drug quirk suppressions that are used on villains and made an alternate version where the results should take the strain of the powerful quirks and allow the user to only be able to use small percentages of the quirk." Inko wonders in perception. So instead of it turning off the quirk all the way, it only takes enough of it away to where it will be used safely, she clarifies. "Has there been a final product yet?" "Honestly, no." David groans. "Not many are willing to allow themselves be tested on when it comes to taking away their quirks. But with your permission, I would like to finish the product with Izuku, so we may finish before his summer is over, and that we are able to have the drug to be a perfect match to your son's condition." "You want to experiment on my son?" She raised her voice at them. "It's been agreed that it's not safe for him to even attempt to use it until he is physically fit. We won't have Midoriya-kun use the strength aspect of his quirk, Midoriya-san." Nedza moved in to calm the woman down. "We only asked to use his float aspect to where we should be able to determine how much of a dosage he will need, as the float aspect is at the same level as the strength. Hence why Izuku was being pulled violently upwards rather than acting like a balloon being tethered to something." Inko sat back in her chair, gazing at the floor in thought at what this could mean for her boy. How this could be helpful for his future and protection. But she has to also consider what this could also imply for her boy both emotionally and mentally. She doubts any young child would take to being in a lab all day where he would be studied and inspected and possibly be administered the still-tested stage medicine. "If I am to agree with this, then we are going to have some ground rules that if ever crossed, then both these experiments, trip, and studies at UA are over," she says in a demanding manner. "I will not trust anyone who goes against my wishes and will for my son, because he is still indeed my son, and I will see that hell is frozen over before anyone hurts him." David opens his lips, looking ready to both disputes and comforts the mother, that how far that she might think they would go is both incorrect and never was going to happen. But Nedzu lifts his hand to the man and talks for the both of them. "Of course, Midoriya-san, what you state will go to the letter." And so true to their promise, the experiment of Izuku's training at Island began. In the morning, Izuku would get up, eat, tidy himself, and get ready. At midday, Izuku will be at the park with Melissa and his mother, along with any hero that was on babysitter duty that day, and have a picnic that Inko brought along with them. At mid-noon, both children would be led to the staff facility lab, where Nedzu and David would be waiting for them. The first day was a physical exam, the next day was a wellness test. The third was to check if he had any allergies to any of the components of the created medication. Fourth was a relaxing time, where Melissa would Izuku her own personal lab where she did kitty projects of her own, with adult oversight, of course. By the next week, Izuku was on the final trial grounds to see how powerful of a dosage he would need to use one for all in a secure manner while experimenting with float only. The sickest part of this was they had to inject the medicine into his arm, as they attempted to create a form that was digestible or even in a pill form, but all were proven ineffective just like its original drug. By the 4th week, they were there. Aizawa arrived as promised, and the makeshift family celebrated the now 10-year-old at an expensive restaurant that David secured for them all for a night. Once back at the home, they all concluded the night with cake and gifts. Inko gifted Izuku a new All Might merch that she knew her son didn't have yet. Aizawa gave him new exercise clothes and sneakers, in red of course, for the next term. Nedza gifted the child new literature and a laptop of his very own. A little to the mother's dismay, Melissa handed Izuku an album of the time they spent so far here on Island. Apparently, Midnight was intent on capturing as many moments as possible of the two together, and even requested Hound Dog for his assistance as well. Together they seemed to record it all in pictures and gave it to the young girl, and were about to do the same for Izuku, but she asked if she could do it instead as his birthday gift, which they joyfully agreed to. David was the last one as he gave the child 2 gifts, one longer and a smaller one. Izuku, being a kid, opened the larger one first, and inside he discovered a dark forest green jumpsuit that had red striped lines beginning from the shoulder all the way down to the wrists. There were even black patches that would embrace the boy's midsection all the way down to his legs, but leave the inner thighs green like the rest of the costume. It's a shock absorber suite to aid you in your training back at UA. It blocks any strong quirk attacks from both inside the suit and the outside. David explains, scratching the back of his neck anxiously. See this as your first hero in training uniform, Izuku. Izuku had tears welling up in his eyes as she clutched the garment to his bosom. Thank you, Mr. Shield, he says. I will take good care of it. I promise. His English got better over the time of his stay in Island. Izuku then shifted his attention to his last present and opened the small box to see another little box with David Shield's logo and the labeling reading NQS patches on it. It's the final product of the medicine, David clarified. Sadly, we were never able to make it into a pill, but now this patch will inject the medicine into your arm every day, so you don't have to have the separate shots any longer. Inko removes the box from her son to check it over. So this will cause him to use a safe amount of his quirk without the drawbacks? She inquired. Yes, and it will need to be replaced every 2 months, but as he grows taller and stronger the dosage will drop. David clarifies. Recovery girl, and I will be keeping close tabs on his development. By age 18, he won't need them any longer and can use 100% of his quirk. The MQS stands for Midori Quirk Suppressants. Midori? Asked Inko. Nedza speaks up. The HPSC agreed to call Midori-kun's symptoms the Midori phenomenon, as he is the first case that was brought into light, or at least one that no one could ignore. Inko agrees and turns to Izuku to see. He was both anxious and thrilled at the same time, so she hands out the package to David and asks, "Can you show me how this works?" she asks. David acknowledges and takes the box from her palm and rests on the ground next to Izuku. He tells the child to give him his non-dominant limb and just relax as David applies the patch on. What David gets out of the box appears to be a small plastic injector of some kind where he tears the protective seal off of the end of it to reveal a small needle that was hard to see unless up close, which Izuku was. Izuku turned his head away and buried it in his mom's bosom, attempting to settle his breathing. David carefully places the plastic injector exactly under the shoulder bone on the boy's arm and instructs the boy to take a deep breath when pushing the button on the other end, causing a plastic cube to be inserted into the boy's arm, causing Izuku to gasp at the little sharp poke. David puts away the now worthless syringe and reaches inside the box once more and pulls out a standard white patch that he opens and placed over the square. And that was it. Can you move your arm okay? David questions the child, who wiggles his arm, lifting it up and down before nodding, revealing he couldn't feel a thing. If Izuku didn't feel that little sting or can see the patch concealing, then he honestly would never know it was there. It should fall off on its own in 2 months. The patch will maintain spotless the entire time, no need for renewal. Also, no need to stress about it getting damp either. Izuku should be able to do everything as he normally would. He comforted everyone. Both Inko and Aizawa nod as they both observed carefully as it was applied to the boy. They were Izuku's guardians from both school and at home, so they will more likely have to apply the patches until the boy is much bigger and able to do it on his own. The night then finished there. Izuku went to bed, happier than he has been since that night when his world was turned upside down. The remainder of the journey to Island was nothing but a pleasure. The two pals spent as much time together as possible as Izuku's stay there was almost over for them. So they made sure to make the most of it, as they also requested for photos to continue to be taken of them to add to their similar scrap albums. Though eventually at the conclusion of the visit, the Japanese folk were eager to travel home. Melissa vowed she would be visiting them next during her winter vacation, which Izuku couldn't wait for, but until then the two parted with vows to video chat daily. Back on the aircraft, Izuku reclined next to his mother as they flew back to Japan in the private jet. Yagi-san sat across from them, taking the space next to Nedzu, who was working on his laptop. Yagi-san and Izuku were conversing again through a notepad and coding again. Aizawa was napping in the rear of the aircraft while Midnight and Hound Dog were playing cards next to the sleeping guy. Once landed, Izuku was permitted to spend the next week at his mother's home before the next term was to commence. Izuku unpacked before taking the position next to Sumo on the bed. The now 1-year-old canine did go on the journey, but was at a doggy daycare for most of the stay on the island, as he is a long-haired dog and couldn't have a chance to have his hair get into any of the sensitive machinery that littered the entire island. Though Izuku and Melissa did make sure to visit the dog daily. Everyone went to their own rooms to relax and recharge for the evening. Izuku was determined to just view movies for the night, even eat his dinner in his room, as he desired alone time that night. By the end of the recharging week, Izuku was up and ready to face school again, but this time was able to do more, as now he was in charge of One for All. Thank you for joining us on this journey through What If Deku Met All Might 5 years early. We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to Krisamity for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on archiveofourown.org for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Zenin Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section. See you soon in the next video.